to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. The lamp in the corner is set low, a circle of warm light that layers itself over the familiar surfaces. It pulls across the table, spills its amber onto the grain of the wood, and lets the edges of the room sit in a softer dark. You notice how the light makes everything look like something you could take in with a slow breath. The stack of mail, once sorted, the book with its spine softened by reading, the tea towel folded and forgotten beside a mug. Nothing demands that you narrate how you arrived here. The room simply holds you, as if it had been expecting the quiet that comes after people stop explaining. On the table there are two mugs. One is the one you used. The other is slightly smaller, a chip on its rim that you pretend not to see. The second mug does not speak. It rests with the same indifferent patience as a coat draped over the back of a chair or a pair of gloves tucked into the basket by the door. These objects suggest company without insisting on it. They testify to a domestic life shared sometimes and kept private at other times. The traces of someone else's routine overlapping with yours in a way that feels like an accepted fact, rather than a story that needs telling. You move slowly. The wood under your palms is cool, where your fingers linger. The fabric of the couch responds to the curve of your body, giving enough for ease, but not collapsing into anything dramatic. You become aware of small textures, the faint fuzz along the edge of a blanket, the smoothness of a coaster under the mug, the way the lamp's shade muffles the bulb into a gentler brightness. Each detail is quiet and deliberate, as if the room itself had been curated over time to hold nights like this. Nights that are not performances, nights that do not require explanation. Outside the window, the city breathes its own kind of night. Distant lights blink and blur behind the curtain, not intruding but present, like neighbors who have settled into their own stories. The sound from the street is softened, cars at a sleepy pace, the murmur of voices already distant, the occasional shiver of a bus, wrapped by the glass and the curtain so that it feels like an ocean of low rhythm, rather than specific happenings. When you look toward the window, the night beyond seems less of a scene to interpret, and more of a dark companion that keeps the room from feeling isolated. There is a folded shirt on the armchair, folded in the way someone who has known the chair for years leaves things, not perfectly neat, but not careless either. The shirt carries the faint warmth of earlier movement, an imprint of breath from a body that was there. Near it, a small stack of postcards, messages exchanged, some of them written in a hurried hand, some in a calmer script, sits face down. You could flip them open and read their tiny private economies of ink. You could, but the thought of needing to explain why they matter never rises. Their presence is simply part of the room's grammar, a life lived with other lives, overlapping in ways that make space feel fuller, without asking for justification. You notice how the light softens the edges of things you do not intend to examine. The lamp refracts against the glass of a plant pot, throwing a faint network of shadows on the wall. The plant itself leans toward the light, its leaves not perfectly symmetrical, bearing small marks of a season of growth. The imperfections are part of the domestic honesty here. Objects that carry wear, small histories, domestic economies. The room does not look recent or staged. It looks like the slow accretion of decisions made not for show, but because of comfort. Where a blanket ended up, which coasters collected rings, which books remained open, and where a pen was set down. There is no rush in your breathing. The rhythm of the apartment is its own gentle metronome. The refrigerator hums, a neighbor's television mumbles through a wall. Water ticks once as a pipe cools. These sounds are not interruptions. They are the background ordering of a space that has contained many nights. They feel like proof that continuity exists, that previous events and future mornings are simply parts of a larger container, that tonight holds this stillness. The sense of continuity makes it easier to leave explanations unmade. The world continues whether or not you offer an account of how you arrived at this particular moment. And the night honors that omission. You reach for the second mug. It has the faint ring of a conversation's final moments. Steam long dissipated, a faint fingerprint on its handle. When you touch it, you do not translate its presence into a declaration. You allow the object to be what it is, a witness of shared time, a quiet emblem of companionship that exists without performance. There is a warmth in recognizing this, that the domestic traces left by others do not pressure you into telling their stories. The room does not ask you to recite the evening's details. It simply receives them as part of its ongoing hush. Your thoughts do not coalesce into tidy sentences. They meander, looping in on themselves like the pattern on a rug. You think of small fragments, a phrase said softly, a hand that reached and then withdrew, a laugh that lingered like the scent of a spice. None of these require the framework of explanation. They live as textures now, sensory echoes that the night does not demand you parse. You can hold them as you would hold a cup, carefully, with attention, without needing to translate their meaning into something else. On the shelf, photographs lean against one another, their edges softened by time. The faces are not labeled, and there is no urgency to make them legible. They are there to witness, to remind the space of itself, over time. Gatherings that arrived and dispersed, quiet afternoons, folding into evenings, friends who left jackets and stayed a while. These images hum with a kind of chosen proximity, the way people return to one another's lives, not because they must, but because they want to. That proximity is private and domestic here. It does not require a public account nor an explanation. It simply is. You allow your hands to rest in your lap. The lamp's warm circle curves against your skin. You do not measure what you feel against any expectation. Feelings pass in small currents, a settling at the base of the throat, a lightness behind the eyes, a slow easing in the shoulders. The night receives them without remark. You notice the way that not being required to explain changes the texture of these moments. They do not have to perform coherence, and that permission lets them simply be present. There is a softness to the air, a neutral scent of detergent, and the faint trace of whatever meal left its memory on the plates. Smells are gentle, not invasive. The room holds smell the way it holds light, diffused, familiar, unalarmingly intimate. It reminds you that intimacy here is not a showcase, but a domestic state. It is the presence of other living things arranged in ways that make small acts, pouring tea, folding a shirt, setting a mug down, feel like parts of a slow conversation that no one is obliged to narrate. Time does not feel like a line. It is more like a comfortable rhythm that can be acknowledged or not, depending on how much attention you wish to give it. The night does not press you for explanations about the day you had, the people you saw, the decisions you made. It does not ask you to justify the spaces you occupy. It simply makes room. In that quiet, the items around you, the 2 mugs, the folded shirt, the leaning photos, become companions that do not require you to speak for them. They ask nothing but to exist alongside you. You remain in the circle of lamplight, the margins soft and reassuring. There is a continuity here that carries no demand. The room keeps the archive of small living, the jacket left by a chair, the coasters ringed by memory, the plant leaning toward the light. Each object is an offering of privacy and shared life, and the night accepts them without needing stories to go with them. You are held by this plain, steady attention, and in it there is the quiet permission to be present without explanation. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You settle into the small orbit of the room as if you've been living here for a long time, which you have in the way that matters, in habit. and the soft mapping of where things belong, and the way the light always finds the same corner of the couch. The lamp beside the armchair throws a round, warm pool across the low table. The light seems patient, not asking for anything from you. It rests in the same shape it always does, laying small shadows that have learned to live there. There is a second mug on the saucer, cooling in an easy neglect, a faint ring of steam that disappeared into the quiet an hour ago. It looks familiar in a way that feels like the memory of someone's laugh. No explanation attached, just a hint of presence. A sweater is folded on the back of the couch with the lines of use softened by time. A collar pushed slightly out of shape. A place where fingers have smoothed the fabric. The jacket draped over the chair has an elbow worn just enough to be personal. These traces do not demand a story. They exist, steady and unobtrusive, and they make the room feel meant to hold more than one set of hands without making anything about that needing attention. You run a fingertip along the edge of the wooden table. The wood is warm from the lamp. The grain settled into a familiar map beneath your skin. A small stack of books leans against a ceramic pot that holds a plant with leaves that tend toward the night. The titles are not being considered. Only the fact that they are there, spines bent in the way books soften when they are often read, creates a sense of continuity. A photograph, somewhere between formal memory and candid, sits in a frame with tape on the back, an emblem of a moment kept because it fit into this house's particular kind of tenderness. There is no need to say what it is. It remains a soft object of belonging. Beyond the curtains, the city breathes in slow cycles. You can hear it as a distant, even murmur. A tire, a conversation turned to private pitch, and then folded away. The refrigerator hums like a small machine that remembers how to be useful. The sound is not intrusive. It is the outer world softened by layers, glass, curtains, the geography of walls, and the room accepts it without registering it as disruption. It is part of the room's nighttime texture, the same way the fabric of the throw has one frayed thread, and the rest is wholly intact. Your body finds a position that is not an action so much as a settling. You don't shift to make the room comfortable, instead, the room, and you arrange themselves around one another, as if this night already anticipated this particular shape of your presence. Your shoulders unlearn their slight tense angle and lower just enough to be quieter. It's not a thing you decide so much as something that happens, an agreement without signatures. The light draws attention to small, ordinary things. A mug with a lip stained by too strong tea. The faint smell of soap on a dish in the drying rack. The soft crease of linen that has been folded, and folded until it remembers the shape of your hand. A pair of socks, balled up and set near the foot of the couch, suggests movement earlier in the evening. A playlist rests on the speaker, paused between songs. The glow of its display, like a small eye that remembers what you were listening to. These objects do not ask you to explain why they are here. They simply are, and their presence is a quiet allowance. There is a certain kind of privacy here that has nothing to do with secrets. It is the privacy of an interior life being acknowledged by the surrounding things. Curtains hold back the night without shutting it away entirely. The window shows a square of dark where the sky lives, punctuated by a single light, across the way that blinks and then steadies. You watch it for a little while, and then let your attention move to the texture of the pillow beneath your cheek, the low, even rhythm of your breath. The room is not asking you to justify the way you feel. There is no ledger of explanations, no expectation of performance. You are allowed to be present and not be a pattern that needs decoding. Sometimes the state of having been seen lingers like a halo around this place. Whatever the day had been, long, short, messy, bright, its edges have softened. There is a residue of being visible to someone, whether in person or simply in the recognition of your nearest watchers. and it settles into the house as a kind of quiet warmth. It does not demand articulation. It hangs lightly in the air, like a scent you might name if you were making a list, but you do not need to catalog it. It exists as a warming without pressure. You move slowly, noticing the way the floorboards respond beneath your feet. They creak in familiar places, as if greeting you with the same old friendliness. You run a hand along the spine of one of the books, feeling the tiny ridges where pages have been thumbed. A lamp clicks softly when you tilt it, and the new angle reveals the precise shade of paint on the wall, somewhere between neutral and personal, chosen without ceremony. Small decisions made long ago ripple now into comfort. The apartment in these low hours reads like a long exhale. The room holds an economy of light and shadow that does not demand dramatics. The corner by the door is dim but not forgotten. The kitchen, light left on at a distance, bleeds into the hallway and warms up the lines of the stacked dishes drying in the rack, their edges delicate and familiar. The scent of neutral detergent lingers and is calming in its ordinariness. There is no newness here that disrupts. Nothing is sharp enough to require explanation. Even the faint echo of a neighbor, moving into their own quiet night, seems to pass through the walls as a soft, forgiving impression. You notice the way the space has room for small, private rituals. A bent cloth napkin folded and refolded, a pen left uncapped on a coaster, keys in a bowl that has a ring chipped off one edge. Each item speaks to a life that is lived within the same walls, repeatedly, casually. These gestures of domesticity feel like the language you and this place share. There is a warmth to that sharing, a kind of companionship that isn't obliging or loud. It is simply a companionable presence that keeps the night steady. Occasionally, your attention finds the small glimpses of other people's traces, a folded jacket, a mug, a scarf. They do not spark a need to justify or narrate. Instead, they contribute to the room's texture in a way that feels like belonging without requirement. The space feels generous in its allowance of multiple presences, not because it announces them, but because it tolerates the quiet company. You exist in this mutual acceptance, and the feeling of being held by familiar objects is as tangible as any touch. Time passes without announcing itself. The lamplight remains steady. Your breathing stays gentle. Some nights ask for answers. This room does not. It holds you without a single expectation, and that steadiness becomes, slowly, a small relief. You move through the apartment's quiet, as if you are walking through a well-loved sentence. Each word known, each pause expected, and you let the rhythm of it settle in the space behind your eyes. The night outside continues in its softened way, and the interior holds its own steady weather, patient and unspoken. You come in and close the door behind you with that soft, familiar click that means something like permission. The hallway light is dimmer here, the threshold where the rest of the world thins into a volume you can keep on the shelf. Your keys leave a quiet metallic echo against the bowl by the door, a sound that blends into the apartment's smaller, constant noises. The low breath of the refrigerator, the clock's gentle miscounting somewhere in the living room. You do not need to explain why you are inside. You are simply inside, and the room receives you without curiosity. The lamp by the sofa is already on, its shade tilting the world into a small, generous pool of yellow. It softens the edges of everything it touches. The stack of books on the coffee table, the chipped mug that holds solitary pens, the folded sweater that lives on the armchair, because pockets of warmth have been left there for later. Light settles over these objects like a hand that remembers where it belongs. You stand for a moment under that hush, feeling the soft ledger of the day drain into the ordinary clutter of the evening. The presence of another life here, faintly suggested by a second mug, a pair of socks draped over a chair back, a jacket tossed on the hook, makes the room feel fuller, not crowded. It is the kind of fullness that does not demand a story, only recognition. Your coat comes off and lands on the same hook it always does, the material muting itself against the wood. There is a faint scent traced to it, soap and a city evening, the residue of laughter or conversation, the small, careful perfumes people leave behind. You breathe it in like a footnote to your day, letting it settle in your chest. The curtains are drawn just enough to keep the night from pooling into the room. They hold back the black with a considerate thickness, allowing only a cool rectangle of streetlight to frame the sill. Outside, there is the soft, rhythmical hum of a city settling. Tires over wet pavement, a distant door closing. Someone else's life making the same small noises you are making elsewhere. You move through the apartment slowly, each gesture slightly deliberate because the world has been loud and now it is not. You pause by the kitchen counter where two mugs sit, one still carrying the faint wetness of an earlier tea, the other a small ring of dried coffee. They exist together without fuss. There is a comfort to seeing the evidence of shared habits. Someone else's spoon tucked into a cup, a coaster left askew, because it signals a pattern you belong to without having to define it. The kettle's last sigh is memory now. The quiet that fills the kitchen has weight, and you notice how the tiles feel cool beneath your bare feet. You run a finger along the spine of a book on the table, the embossed letters familiar under your touch. The book is not meant to be read tonight, it only anchors the room. Photographs line the shelf in frames of mismatched wood and metal, candid images of dinners, a pair of hands mid-gesture, a dog that has learned to sleep in laps. They hang together without caption, offering glimpses that never demand translation. You recognize the faces in those stills the same way you recognize furniture. By a long acquaintance made of trivial, endless details, there is an ease there, a warmth that rises from the knowledge of being known in small ways, and no larger explanations required. Your phone rests face down on the table like a bird that has folded its wings. Messages are present, but no particular one presses. A notification's glow would be loud in this quiet, so it waits, choosing to be background. You allow the decision to not reach for it to be a simple, unremarkable thing. Instead, you sit, and the sofa welcomes you in its familiar give. The fabric has softened where you usually rest your hip. The indentation is an old friend. You exhale, and the breath that leaves you is not a problem-solving breath, but a settling breath. It is the kind that makes room for small, tender thoughts, and for nothing at all. There are faint traces of tonight in the apartment. A napkin folded and left near the bowl. Where your keys now rest, a song half remembered, humming inside your head. The apartment keeps these remnants without asking for meaning. They are unexamined domestic artifacts. A scarf draped over the back of a chair, a pencil sharpened to a precise point. They speak of people who inhabit the same space and practice the same gentle negligence. Chosen family resides in these details. You feel their presence as a kind of domestic immunity, something in which you are allowed to rest your edges without performing clarity. The lamp's light grazes the pictures on the wall, and you notice a postcard pinned by a magnet, the handwriting on it small and unworried. The message was meant for a former evening, a thank you that never loomed larger than its paper. It remains in place, soft evidence that the apartment keeps things that are tender and not tidy. You like that about this room. It keeps things that are neither tidy nor in need of explanation. They are present simply because they have been left here, and their existence softens the edges of the night. You move again, a small circuit, through the space, and your hand finds the tea kettle's cool, stainless, where it sits on the counter. You do not intend to make tea. Perhaps the motion is an old habit, a way of practicing gentleness with your own hands. The kitchen light throws a narrow rectangle onto the floor. The light shows the tiny imperfections into the tile, and the careful scuff where the door has been opened many times. The apartment's imperfections are not failures. They are signatures of use, of presence. The paint on the windowsill is nicked in one place where a plant was once lifted to the sun and set down again. You think of that plant and the slow way it learned to balance on the sill, leaning toward evening light. It thrived without explanation. There is a calendar on the wall with dates circled in a variety of inks, the handwriting a chorus of different moods. You don't read the notes, you simply like knowing that time is annotated here by small decisions. A card with a watercolor painting leans against the fridge, colors halting and bright. It was made by a friend you saw earlier this week, and now it sits where you can see it from the sofa. Like a quiet witness, the room has been shaped by hands and visits, and the casual imprint of many busy lives. In this space, you are not asked to justify where you have been or who you have been with. You are only allowed to be. You listen to the apartment breathe with you, the soft settling of the building, the tiny mechanical sighs that happen when things cool down. It is as though the room and you are sharing a secret that requires no language, the acknowledgement that the day has been long and that being present now is enough. There is an unspoken compact between you and this space, a permissive agreement to let explanations slide away, like the evening light through curtains. You notice that your thoughts slow, not in order to be quiet, but because the room invites a gentler pace. You allow them to meander, unfixed and kind, drifting like the steam that once rose from a cup left to cool. A clock ticks somewhere behind the bookcases, patient and indifferent. The sound is steady, a metronome that does not hurry you. The apartment wraps around you in its usual contours: shelf, cushion, window, lamp. And within those contours, you discover an ease that is not loud. It settles into you like warm cloth. In this place, you do not explain. You simply are. The night presses at the window, but does not demand entrance. It remains outside, respectful of the boundary curtains maintain. Inside, there is domestic quiet, and you rest in it like a body content to be simply tended to, observed by the soft lamplight, accompanied by the familiar residue of chosen lives. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. The lamp on the side table casts a pool of warm light that looks practiced at being small. It settles neatly over the grain of the wood, finding the scratches that have belonged to the surface for years, and deciding not to worry about them. Around the light, the rest of the room keeps a softer temperature, shades of dusk that the curtains hold back without fuss, a sliver of the night visible at the edges where the fabric does not meet perfectly. There is a hush, the kind that comes when electric things slow into their evening rhythms, and the apartment inhales the cooler air from the window. You notice how the hum of the city outside is a fabric stretched thin across the walls, rather than a current to hold on to, and how that felt. Softness makes the objects here feel like companions rather than props. On the low table, the mugs remain where they were left. One still has the faint, dark ring of tea gone cool. The other bears the pale fingerprint of milk gone flat. They sit a little askew from each other, a quiet, unplanned symmetry, and the space between them reads as ordinary, in a way that is its own kind of gentleness. Nearby, a pair of socks folded and laid on the arm of the chair looks almost ceremonial in its unbothered stillness. There is no trace of attention in the way they rest, only a practicality that keeps the room from feeling overworked. A stack of dishes is balanced in the sink, not startling or neglected, but present like an agreed-upon interruption to the night's slower plans. The soap by the basin still beads the same clear drops of suds, drying in a way that is patient and quiet. Books stand both on the shelf and on the floor, in small, steady clusters. Their spines tilt in familiar angles, the way a group of people settles towards each other without deciding to. One book is open face down on the coffee table, as if it had simply paused and remembered to wait. A jacket hangs over the back of a chair, its sleeves folded into themselves like a hand that stopped mid-gesture. A scarf is draped over a lamp, admired only by the light it shadows. Each object holds its place, not frozen, but content to be what it is, as if the room itself prefers to let things be, rather than to ask for their stories. You move slowly through the space, and your steps make the kind of sound that the floor knows well. There is a particular comfort in tracing the trail of your own presence, without feeling compelled to account for it. The curtains are drawn just enough to keep the night from intruding too sharply. The glass under them reflects faint mobiles of lamplight and the darker suggestion of the street beyond. Where the window meets frame, a thin line of cold presses against the air, a reminder of the world out there that is neither threatening nor insistent. You can feel the way the room wraps itself around that line, making a softer border between inside and out. You notice small things, crumbs on the sill that the broom will take care of tomorrow, the softened corner of a cushion that holds the shape of evening conversations taken back into the fabric, a spoon with tarting along the edge where jam dried and dried again. None of these details push for explanation. They are simply present, and that presence is permission enough. There is a kind of generosity in the way the space accepts residues of living. The apartment seems designed to accommodate the unfinished. A cup with a cold rim, a blanket that hasn't quite been smoothed, the paperback with a spine creased from the left side of a sentence. You can let your attention hover over these things without them asking you to justify their state. In a drawer somewhere, a collection of tickets and folded notes lives in the company of receipts, a little private archive of days that were neither remarkable nor forgettable. You do not open the drawer. The thought of it feels unnecessary and tender, like touching the edge of memory without pulling it free. The room gives you that permission too, to know that moments have been noted and then left alone to rest. There is peace in that manner of remembering, where nothing insists on being read aloud or arranged into neat sequence. It is enough that there are traces, that the night recognizes the traces and offers them a gentle keep. The lighting plays between objects and shadows, the way a soft conversation might move between familiar topics, never demanding a conclusion, often comfortable with the way sentences trail off. Your shirt folded over the back of a chair picks up the lamplight and reveals a faint sheen along the fabric, a memory of movement and warmth. The cushion you sat on before stands slightly bowed in its center, a mild indentation like an exhale. Even the air has texture, not scented or perfumed, but carrying the neutral warmth of shared rooms and habitual laundry. It is the smell of a place that knows what it does in the world and does not need to prove itself. There is a second mug across from yours on the table, and the fact of it is quiet company. It does not require you to fill it, to narrate who used it or why it was there. Its presence simply suggests that this space has room enough for others, and that the having of room is an ordinary practice here. You find a small comfort in the implication that intimacy can be practical, visible as objects and arrangements rather than as declarations. The chair across from you leans into the light with the encouragement of long use. Its upholstery holds the kind of softness accrued from evenings spent in easy conversation and gentle silences. You trace the edge of the table with your fingertips and marvel at how little the room insists on correction. The lamp does not fuss with the stray book. The coat does not plead to be rehung with care. Everything is allowed to be useful in the way it already is. In that allowance, you sense a kind of ethical peace, an understanding that some things in life do not need to be fixed immediately. There is no rush to tidy or to explain. The objects are a chorus of ordinary particulars that together make a steadier atmosphere than any single item could create. Outside, the sound of distant tires and the occasional soft laughter sail up and away. reading like punctuation for the steady human heartbeat of the neighborhood. Inside, the apartment breathes in reply. There is a method to the stillness that is not about performance. The night here cares more about giving space than about being seen. It is not dramatic. It is simply consistent in its low-level attentiveness. You feel the ease of being here, an ease established by habitual care rather than spectacle. You find your place against the back of the sofa, letting the cushion support the weight of your shoulders. The room keeps being itself, unbothered by attention or indifference. The light continues to pool, soft and patient. You notice the outlines of familiar items as if for the first time. A bookmark tucked halfway out of a book. 2 pens sharing a mug on the desk. The way the lampshade slumps just a hair to the left. None of these details demand further commentary. They exist comfortably in a space that practices non-interrogation. There is a subtle generosity in that lack of demand. The room offers familiarity without curiosity that preys. It holds traces of presence and absence with the same neutral regard, making room for whatever mood you bring without needing you to explain it. You breathe, and the breath is met by a house that knows how to be steady. The night outside is cool and distant. The night inside is warm and uncomplicated. Here, there is nothing to be settled beyond the quiet arrangement of things. The evening stretches on without needing your account, and in that extension, you find a small, sustaining solace. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You notice the way the light gathers on the low shelf, how it pools into the indentations of familiar objects as if it recognizes them by touch. A small lamp throws an amber circle across the worn wood. It picks out the edges of a stack of books, the soft slope of a mug left cooling on the coaster, the faint line where a sweater was folded and then set aside. Nothing in the room feels newly arranged. Nothing is staged. The things here have the ease of long companionship. Wear in the cushions, a smudge on the window frame that remains because life has been lived and no one is pretending otherwise. The air holds the neutral warmth of an inhabited place. It smells of the last wash of sheets, the diluted sweetness of something baked earlier in the week, the clean linen of a shirt draped over a chair. There is no sharpness to it, just the low, familiar blend that means people have been moving through this space, leaving small traces like punctuation marks that don't demand explanation. A second mug sits a couple of feet away from yours, rim cooled and ringed with condensation, a quiet witness to a conversation that has already happened. The sight of it does not make you account for anything. It merely rests beside you as evidence that you are not alone. Outside the curtains, the night rests at a distance. The window is a dark, slightly reflective surface. When you glance at it, you see the faint mirror of the lamp and the layered shapes of the room. Beyond that, there is a low, even hum. Cars, a distant neighbor arriving home. A tree's leaves rubbing against each other in the night breeze. The sound is softened by glass and fabric and the thick walls of this place. Nothing presses in. The world beyond the curtains continues, indifferent and steady, like a machine moving along its rhythm. Inside, the sounds are more intimate, the occasional pop from settling wood, the refrigerator's soft cycle, a clock that keeps time without fuss. Your body remembers how to rest within these contours. You adjust a pillow, feel the textured weave of the fabric against your palm. Notice the small coolness of the window pane when you rest a fingertip there for a breath. There is a certain generosity in the ordinary textures, the heaviness of a throw over your knees, the smoothness of the table beneath your hand, the slightly rough edge of a paperback you leafed through earlier. Those surfaces are steady. They hold you without announcing it. You let your attention move slowly from place to place in the room, taking an inventory that reads less like a checklist and more like an affectionate survey. Each object is a soft marker of lived evenings, shared stories, comfortable silences. There are traces of the night that happened, Earlier, a folded jacket in the entryway, a key in the shallow bowl, an extra scarf looped over the banister. They sit without ceremony, accepted and ordinary. A folded note peeks from between the pages of a cookbook, half a sentence penned in a hand you recognize, the kind of small, private thing that can make a space feel companionable. You do not need to reconstruct how it came to be there. The presence of these things is a kind of non-verbal companionship. They suggest a history of attention and return. They are neither demands nor explanations. They are just part of the room's grammar. Light changes the way you remember the room. Under this lamp, colors soften, edges blur into each other. Shadows collect in the corners, like quiet listeners. The curtain's fabric holds a little of the night against itself, muffling the world beyond and giving the room a private hush. You become aware of the way your breathing matches the gentle stillness around you. It is not a practiced calm. It is the slackening that follows being seen enough for the day. There is no pressure to sum up anything you have lived through. The present here is a slow, permissive thing that lets breath happen without commentary. There are tiny domestic narratives in the way the kitchen looks tonight. A pair of dishes, one neatly rinsed and stacked, the other with a faint ring and a dry crumb still clinging to the edge. A tea towel draped casually over the oven handle. The light in that space is cooler, a pale pool contrasting with the lamp's warm halo. These small discrepancies, used mug, folded shirt, the way a chair angles just so, are not problems to be fixed. They are the soft evidence of days that contain both ordinary tasks and moments that asked more of you. They do not require justification. They simply sit, and you sit with them. There is a kind of language in the room that has nothing to do with words. The placement of a cushion tells you where someone preferred to sit the other night. The slightly deepened indentation on the arm of the sofa is an unspoken map. Here, you leaned on the arm and looked through the window. There, you rested your head against the back while holding a warm mug. These impressions are gentle confirmations that you have occupied the same world as other people. Not in headlines, not in explanations, but in small shared gestures that gather meaning by repetition. Your attention drifts to the soft glow on the floor, where the lamp's light meets the rug. The fibers accept the light and yield to it, as if sleep were a collective agreement among objects to loosen their edges for the night. You trace the path of the light with your eyes, slow and unhurried, and feel the same looseness in your limbs. Memory comes without pressure, a laugh that lingered, a glance that landed and stayed for a beat, a hand that found another at some point during the evening. Those moments are not dissected here. They are like small pebbles at the bottom of a pond, visible if you look, but not begging for explanation. A song you heard earlier now exists only as a memory of certain chords, the way the melody sagged into something warm. The room keeps a residual echo of it, like the faint scent of something that has been in the air. You do not replay the music. Instead, you notice the silence that follows music, and how quiet feels permissive rather than hollow. This is a space that allows things to be where they are without needing to translate them into a story or tidy them away. The quiet here does not accuse you of being undone. It holds space for the fact that you might be unfinished, and that unfinishedness is not a failing. You notice small imperfections with a kind of fondness. A chip in a mug's glaze, the frayed cuff of a sweater, a bookmark unevenly placed. They make the room more honest, more lived in. You run your fingers along the edge of a table and feel the slight groove left by years of use. Each small mark is a faint archive of time. There is no urgency to make them disappear. They exist alongside the warmth, and in their presence the room feels unpolished in a way that is deeply permissive. Time thins at the edges here. Minutes do not clang into one another. They slide. The ordinary tasks of the evening have been completed or allowed to rest. You are left with the gentle responsibility of simply inhabiting the room. The sense of being witnessed is soft and private, more like a fold in a blanket than a spotlight. You might imagine someone else's movements in these spaces, the ordinary choreography of two or more people unwinding after a day. But the image is spare, not insistent. It does not require you to recount or justify. It simply affirms that presence has been shared, and that shared presence need not be explained to be meaningful. As the light settles and the hum beyond the curtains continues, you remain here, held by the quiet. It is not a demand to be anything other than what you are, an adult who has passed through a day of being seen, and who now inhabits a space where none of that has to be accounted for. The room does not ask for explanations. It offers the simple, rare luxury of not needing them. The room is small enough that one light can reach every corner, and you let it. The lamp on the low table throws a circle of warm light over a pair of mugs, one with a faint ring where it has sat undisturbed all evening, the other with a tiny chip along the lip. The chipped mug carries a history without needing to be named. Its weight in your hand brings back gestures that feel ordinary and unremarkable, the way a voice might settle into a familiar frequency without demanding notice. You do not count moments or justify attachments. You simply notice that the mug is there, a quiet companion on a long evening, and that is enough. The fabric of the couch remembers the shape of you. When you press your palm to the armrest, the material gives just a little and then settles, an echo of recent presence. There is a blanket folded over the back with a soft, worn edge where it has been tucked and untucked by habit. It belongs to someone you think of sometimes as if they were another room in this apartment, part of the layout where jackets hang and a second set of keys might live. There is no ledger of favors and returns here, only a continuity of things held close and then set down again. The night keeps that continuity for you. Outside the curtains, the city breathes in its own slow way. You can feel the difference between the room and the night. The air beyond the glass is cool and a shade darker than the inside, but the curtain hangs to soften that contrast. Through the weave, you catch the suggestion of distant headlights, the slow blinks of a window on a higher floor, the occasional far-off voice like a foil of sound that does not need to be parsed. The building takes its noise and smooths it like a hand running a cloth over a surface until only texture is left. You notice the hush and do not translate it into meaning. It is simply another layer in the space where you rest. A shelf near the lamp collects the quiet residues of long days. A stack of books tipped at an angle, a pair of reading glasses folded and waiting, a small bowl with coins and a pen. These objects hold time in their arrangement. They are not statements, not explanations. They are the traces of someone who lives here, who returns and moves things by habit and forgets a little, who welcomes small disorder because it is honest. You trace the edge of a book with your thumb and linger on the texture of the paper, the roughness at the top where the pages have been thumbed through in pockets of evening. The sensation is small and satisfying. You do not need to name what those pages have held for you. You allow the feeling they create in your chest to be enough. There is a second mug at the foot of the table, cold now, the color slightly darker where condensation once gathered. The presence of two mugs does not command you to account for the absent other. Instead, it offers a soft continuity. Evenings sometimes include another, sometimes they do not, and both modes are ordinary. The second mug becomes a relic of a conversation, a joint pause, a laugh that left a footprint in air. The memory of that laugh is not a story you must tell. It sits folded into the fabric of the night like the blanket over the couch, an imprint you can press into without unfolding the whole thing. Your feet find the floor in a certain way. The coolness under the toes is familiar, a small contrast to the steady warmth of the lamp. You let your attention rest on that sensation rather than spinning a narrative about why your feet feel the way they do. The simplicity of cold against skin is enough to hold your awareness for a while. There is a softness to the way the room meets you, a cushion that accepts weight, a window that does not glare, a radiator that ticks on with a reliable, almost conversational rhythm. You notice these small domestic cadences and let them register as their own kind of company. You remember nothing formal about the evening just past, nor do you feel compelled to itemize your feelings about it. Instead, you recall the small, almost mechanical details. The way a jacket rested on the back of a chair, with its sleeve folded over. How a book lay open and then closed, because the page had been reached and then left. These fragments pass through you like light through curtains. They are translucent and leave no residue that demands explanation. The night does not press you to translate them into meaning. It holds them like beads on a string that you can touch without having to make a necklace. The lamplight pools on the floor in a soft, imperfect circle. Shadows slant away from furniture, creating shapes that might be described but do not require labeling. A coat hangs near the door, a familiar silhouette against the wall. In the coat pocket, you sense the contour of a folded piece of paper, a receipt, perhaps a note. The thought of it is tactile, an itch you do not need to scratch. Objects in this room are anchors and also small mysteries. The absence of resolution to those small mysteries is part of their comfort. Your breathing follows a pattern that feels neither hurried nor measured. It is simply an ongoing background process, gentle and unremarkable. You notice the temperature of the air at the throat, the small movement of the chest, and the way the hum of the night seems to line up with those rhythms. The heater clicks and then quiets. The neighbor in the next apartment moves with a rhythm. You can sense more than hear. A shuffle of paper, perhaps? A movement that translates into the building's slow settling. None of these details requires you to assemble them into a coherent argument about who you are or what you did. They are present simply to be felt. There is a photograph tucked into the frame on the shelf, edges softened by years in the sunlight. The faces in it do not demand names. They exist as a warmth in the frame, an example of ease with one another's company. Choosing to look at the faces does not obligate you to narrate the origin of every smile. You rest with them as an expression of a life shared in small increments. Shared meals, shared keys, shared silences at the end of long days. The knowledge that these moments are not public, and do not need to be, makes them feel protected here. You notice how your hands feel when they move, how fingertips meet fabric, how the tension in your palm eases when you release the mug. These micro movements are tiny revelations, not tests. The pleasure in a familiar gesture is not a confession. It is simply resonance. Your senses have started to carry the weight of the evening for you in gentle ways. The need to interpret or explain recedes, and sensations swell into their own rightness. The quiet warmth of the lamp, the slight stick of the rug beneath your foot, the faint scent of citrus soap that lingers on a hand towel. The room offers privacy like a well-thumbed book. It is written in small domestic print. A stray earring in a dish, a shirt left draped over a chair, a lamp switched off in the doorway. These things feel deliberate only in their ordinariness. They are not performance. They are the language of living together with yourself and others, a grammar of intimate, unspoken care. You sit with that grammar and find that the sentences do not need translation. The night holds them as they are. A sound from elsewhere in the building moves through the wall, brief and unremarkable, an elevator, a muffled laugh, a door closing. The sound lives in the same space as the lamp's glow and the folded blanket. It does not demand entry into your life. It simply accompanies the room's quiet, a reminder that other lives carry their own weight. You do not feel compelled to reconcile their rhythms with yours. The coexistence is enough. Your awareness can settle into sensations now, and for once you let it. You allow the small things to be sufficient. The angle of the lamp's light, the cold at the soles of your feet, the weight of the mug in your hand, the soft give of the couch. Interpretation loosens its grip. Explanations move to the periphery, like distant stars framing a sky you no longer need to chart. Here, without the pressure to define or defend, presence becomes its own quiet architecture. You rest within it like someone in a familiar chair, letting the room hold you while the world beyond keeps its own slow hours. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You notice first the way your shoulders are no longer braced against anything. No one moment when you decide to let them go. Just a slow softening like cotton settling into itself. The lamp at the corner of the room throws a small pool of amber light across the bookshelf, and the spines of books that have sat in certain orders for a few seasons now. You have learned the patterns of this apartment, how the light lands on the same spot on the rug where dust gathers but is never urgent, how the curtains hold back the night without fighting it. Tonight the lamplight seems to confirm a kind of permission that doesn't need proclamation. It simply exists, and you exist within it. A mug sits on the low table, barely warm, the faint trail of a thumbprint on the rim. There is another mug, empty and slightly smudged, from the mark of someone who has been here and left their warmth behind. The second mug is quiet evidence of company, not the sort of presence that demands a story be told, but an imprint of 2 evenings overlapping. You watch the way the light picks out the glaze, the way small imperfections in the ceramic feel like an old joke you both used to make and then never needed to repeat. The presence of that other cup means there was a shared rhythm earlier, a conversation that bent to the contours of both of you, or comfortable silences that didn't have to be explained. It's enough. The room is arranged with the ease of long use. A jacket tucked over the back of a chair, a scarf folded on top of a stack of magazines, a plant on the windowsill turned toward the last warmth of the evening. These are intimate domestic traces that say you live here in ways that are quiet and whole. They are not performative. They are not lined up for anyone's approval. They are simply how things are. You find the familiarity of these small objects settles the body in a way that words cannot. The hand rests on the arm of the chair and finds the worn velvet of the upholstery. The texture is neither new nor precious, but it holds a memory of touch. Your fingers accept that memory with a small private gratitude that does not demand to be turned into narrative. Beyond the window, there is the soft, steady sound of the city folding itself into the night. It comes as a low, layered hum, occasional far-off breaks, a distant conversation that never reaches the ear clearly, the sigh of wind moving across a rooftop. The sound does not press into the room. It slips around the edges of the glass and becomes a backdrop to the interior quiet. You notice it only when you allow the rest of your attention to ease. It acts like a friend reading in the same room, a presence felt but not needing to speak. The air is slightly cool near the window, a reminder of the boundary between private warmth and the wider world. It is a comfortable coolness, one that sharpens to let the lamplight feel warmer by contrast. There are traces of movement that the eye registers as stories you do not need to narrate. A folded shirt draped over the armrest as if someone intended to wear it and then decided to rest for a while. A book left open face down on the nightstand, a place held for later reading. A set of keys on a bowl by the door, catching a strip of light and turning it into a small private constellation. These objects sit like notes in a gentle song. They do not insist on being explained. Your chest loosens because none of these things are waiting for an answer. They simply are, and that is enough. You become aware of the breath beneath the shirt at your ribs. It is even and unremarkable, like good weather. There is no requirement to analyze its rhythm, no architecture of self to defend. The body remembers how to inhabit the space without performance, how to curl a hand around a mug, how to tuck a foot under the blanket at the end of the sofa, how to shift weight to the side and find a deeper ease. There is a relief that is not dramatic, not a revelation, but a small recalibration. Like easing a cupboard door closed and finding that it clicks into place without effort. You let yourself notice that relief without naming it. Memory arrives like the smell from an oven long after baking. The scent that suggests someone was here and left a trace, a loaf, or a stew. Things that require time and presence rather than proclamation. You remember an evening of low laughter that tapered without need for resolution. A touch over the back of a hand that meant hello and goodbye without language tugging at it. Those memories sit warm and unobtrusive in the chest. They do not require analysis or defense. They are simply part of the furniture in your inner room, companionable and unbothered. There is a safety in the privacy of these walls, a kind of quiet covenant that says, you do not need to account for any of this. Privacy here is not secrecy as a burden, but privacy as a small kindness. It becomes easier to hold parts of yourself that you do not show the world. Gestures of softness, the way you pause at a line in a book, a phrase that makes your lips curve and then is left to sit there between you and the lamp. You move through the apartment in a rhythm that knows where you belong. The corners are familiar and forgiving. The cushions admit you without question. The blankets know the slope of your shoulders. In this way, the body learns to unclench in a manner that does not require explanation. The night does not demand that you tie everything into sentences. It does not expect the neatness of conclusion. The lamplight invites a kind of unhurried being, the kind that lets thoughts come and fold away without being pinned to the wall. You notice the soft looseness of your neck, the way your jaw is not clenched, the small gap in your hands where they rest, unoccupied by tasks or lists. Even the sense of unfinished business that lingers from the day sits like a book with a bookmarked page. It exists without urgency. You can touch the edge of it and set it down again. The room holds that unreturned call, that unanswered text, that stray worry about tomorrow with a kind of neutral tolerance. It does not expand them into drama. It keeps them as small, manageable presences that do not define the whole. You see yourself through the light, no spectacle, no need for presentation. The face reflected in the window pane is softened, lines smoothed by the dimness of the room. You do not perform for that reflection. You do not try to craft an image. You simply observe the contours of your face, and the observation has the gentle quality of recognition, rather than critique. That recognition is quiet and sustaining. It suggests that being seen by late-night light is a form of company in itself, calibration against the sense that everything must be justified. You let the reflection be companionable rather than corrective. The night keeps no ledger. Whatever you carried into it, small failures, ordinary achievements, things that felt too big to sort, are allowed to exist without needing to be explained. The apartment steadies you in its ordinary ways, the creak of the stair below, the way the radiator cycles on and off, the measured tick of the clock. These rhythms are small anchors. You breathe with them. You attend to the body not as a project, but as presence. Hands that rest, feet that warm, eyes that close, a little more when you allow them. The loosened muscles, the unforced posture, the softened gaze, all tell a quiet story of rest for the moment that holds no demand. There is an ease now that feels like being given a seat at a table where you have always been welcome. The second mug, the folded jacket, the warm book, the lamplight pooling on the rug, all these details form a quiet domestic chorus. They do not interrogate you. They do not seek to analyze how you came to be here, nor do they insist you explain how you feel. They simply provide a place to be. You accept this hospitality without ceremony, and in that acceptance, the body finds a small, steady relief. It is not a solution. It is a soft, ongoing arrival into a night that keeps no accounts and asks for nothing in return. There is a soft economy to the night now, as if the room has decided that nothing needs to move faster than the light across the bookshelf. You notice how the lamp spills a steady, small circle on the surface of the side table, how it keeps watch over the two mugs, one yours, one someone else's, that sit like quiet sentries. Their rims are still outlined by warmth. Steam has long since vanished, leaving only the idea of warmth. The rest of the apartment holds the same kind of residual evidence. A folded sweater on the back of a chair, where someone rested for a while, a pair of shoes slightly askew by the door, a paperback face down with a scrap of paper used for a bookmark. These things make the room honest without explanation. They are traces that do not demand stories, only gentle recognition. You move slowly through familiar spaces because there is no urgency to hurry. The kitchen lights are off. The little hum of the refrigerator is the softest lullaby. You run a fingertip along the edge of the counter and feel the coolness left from earlier activity. The clean place where dishes sat until they were cleared. A small pile of plates waits in the sink, not messy enough to bother, not so tidy as to erase the fact of a meal shared. That half-intentionally imperfect domesticity is a comfort. It says that life here is lived by real hands, sometimes together, sometimes in overlapping rhythms. The room does not announce its belonging. It demonstrates it, gently and without fuss. Outside the window, the city breathes at a different pace. Headlights trace the language of late hours. A distant train offers the steady punctuation of arrival and departure. And the dark trees on the small patch of park beyond the building are almost motionless, their leaves holding onto the night like a secret. The curtains keep most of the outside world at bay. What filters through is a softened suggestion of place, a tsik-abe's memory of voices made far away enough to feel safe. You notice the way the glass holds a partial reflection of the lamp and the two mugs, a layered image where inside and outside touch, but do not blur into one another. That double vision is restful. It allows you to be within and observed by nothing more than a pair of warm eyes cast by a street lamp beyond. Your breathing slows in response to this unpressured environment. There is no demand from the space to explain the day. No need to retell, to tidy up emotional debris, to account for the moments where you were visible and perhaps noticed. The evening's edges fold inward without question. The soft fabric of the blanket on the couch is comforting in a way that is neither dramatic nor performative. It is simply there to be used, to cushion, to absorb small noises. You drape it over your knees and feel the familiar drag of its weight. That contact, mundane and exact, traces something like belonging. You remember, briefly and without fanfare, a laugh shared earlier, the tilt of a head when someone spoke, the small courtesy of being seen. These memories sit beside each other, uncomplicated and true, not demanding moralization or clarification, only the warm place they occupy. The lamp shadows on the wall create a quiet, private geography, a darker corner behind the armchair, a lighter path to the bookshelf, a soft halo on the tabletop. You find that your gaze keeps returning to the shelf, where small objects are placed at easy intervals. Postcards with edges softened, a jar with pens, a tiny plant that leans toward the light. Those objects feel like a chosen constellation, each piece holding a small history of how this home came to be. There is no need to explain why an object sits where it does. Its presence is enough. You let your hands rest among them for a moment, fingers finding familiar textures, the coarse paper of a postcard, the smoothness of a glass jar, the slightly dry surface of the plant's leaves. These contacts are small anchors, tactile assurances that you are in a place arranged by someone who knows your rhythms, or perhaps by you alone, carefully attentive to comfort. Time in this room does not hunch forward. It unfolds. Minutes slide along like soft cloth, each one unhurried. You are not pressed to make meaning of anything right away. The past hours that felt bright and charged earlier sit now like a page left open on the table, edges gently curling but not blazed through. You do not have to recount the exact things you said or the precise shape of other people's faces. What remains are the tender residues, the way someone folded their hands, the half-remembered compliment that felt important in its smallness, the awkward pause that later became comfortable. These residues are not trophies to be polished, but quiet marks of having been present, and they do not demand translation. The room accepts them as it accepts the mugs and the sweater, as part of an ordinary, imperfect home. There is a tender privacy to the night that you allow yourself to enjoy. The lamp's glow is a kind of acceptance without language. In it, small things are permitted to be as they are. A scribble on the margin of a notebook, the slightly bent spine of an oft-read book, a stranger's voice on the radio that you do not need to catch. You find the freedom in not needing to perform clarity. The bones of your day, the visible parts, and the quiet edges do not require you to arrange them into a neat narrative for anyone. They can stay as they are, acknowledged by the room and by you in a simple, wordless way. You notice the texture of the evening on your skin, the slight coolness of air near the window, balanced by the lamp's warmth close by. You flex your toes inside your socks and feel the give of the fabric. Your hands rest on your lap for a long time, palms uncertainly empty and content with emptiness. In this space, small decisions do not carry the weight they might in daylight. There is a certain generosity in the night toward the self, an allowance for things to be slow, for thoughts to arrive without urgency, for presence to be enough. At some point, you find yourself thinking of other evenings with similar shapes, similar mugs cooling on different tables, different sweaters draped, different books bookmarked. There is a kinship across those moments that does not require explanation. It is an acquaintance of being, a sense of being among others without needing to prove or preach. The memory of a shared joke or a late conversation settles like dust that does not itch. You can hold the memory lightly, turn it around in your mind, and then let it rest. There is comfort in repetition, the knowledge that certain textures and small rituals recur, across rooms and across people, weaving a private, gentle continuity. As the minutes continue their unhurried passage, you become aware of the way the apartment seems to exhale. The subtle noises rearrange themselves. The refrigerator cycles on and off. The distant city hum becomes a soft substrate, and even the lamp seems to pulse with the breathing of the room. You place your hand on the side table next to the two mugs and feel the faint residual warmth through the ceramic, a tiny echo of what happened earlier. That echo is not loud. It does not insist on being recognized. It simply exists, like the quiet knowledge that you have shown up today, in whatever form that taking up of space took. There is no demand to evaluate it. The night, steady and unremarking, does not ask you to explain. In the unadorned hush, your thoughts thin into softer textures. They are not erased or resolved. They are merely allowed to be lighter, less insistent. You sit with them in the lamp's circle, where the room's small objects and the outside light conspire to make a private, unexamined piece. The night offers no commentary, only presence. You accept it, feeling time stretch and uncoil without resistance, and you remain there, content with the uncomplicated fact of being in a place that knows you without questions. The lamp on the side table is low enough that its light pools rather than floods. It rests on the book you were reading earlier, the spine softened by fingers and time, a small crease where you often open to the same page and let your place hold for the next night. The light sketches the top edge of a mug that is cooled into a gentle warmth instead of heat. A second mug sits nearby, a little chip on its rim and a faint ring at the bottom where steam dried and left its memory. They are simply there, bearing witness without asking anything of you. The sofa has an indentation where you settled, a shape that knows the angle of your elbows and the slight slant of your knees when you tuck a foot under. A throw lies across the back, folded once and dropped, not flung. Someone else once smoothed it down with a hand that left the pattern slightly misaligned, and that misalignment is a kind of punctuation you have carried with you. A jacket hangs on the hook by the door, a familiar shoulder curve that you could recognize blind. Its sleeve brushes against the wall in a quiet rhythm when the building breathes, a noiseless, private motion. These objects do not require you to narrate their histories. They hold them, always available, never interrogative. The curtains are drawn, heavy fabric, keeping the streetlight softened into a slow, pale wash. Beyond them, the night moves in distant, muffled layers. A bus easing along, a dog's slow pacing somewhere. The occasional high, thin note of a siren that slips past like a distant tide. Inside, the world compacts into domestic particulars. A stack of dishes in the sink is not gleaming or shameful. It is a small monument to a meal shared, or to a night when you ate standing at the counter, leaning on an elbow, thinking about something that belongs only to you. A towel hangs over the oven door, its edge frayed from years of use, smelling faintly of the citrus soap you like. There is comfort in the way worn materials carry the traces of hands without demanding explanation. Your phone is face down on the coffee table, the dark screen reflecting the lamp like a small night pond. Messages wait, some with blue dots that blink and mean something, others quiet and already read. None of them insist upon your attention. The silence that rests around the furniture is thick but not hollow. It is layered with the sound of the building settling into midnight, with the small mechanical hum of the refrigerator, with the occasional click as pipes equalize. Each sound is a gentle punctuation, a reminder that systems continue to run, even in pauses. If you reach for the mug, its ceramic coolness meets your palm and carries with it the residue of a day that had shape. An errand, a conversation, an hour where you felt seen, and an hour where you didn't. The mug does not judge. An extra spoon rests in the bowl beside it. A smaller gesture that implies someone else might come back to it, or might have come back already, and left it there, in a moment of familiarity. That small accommodation, 2 mugs, 2 spoons, a folded sweater, is not an obligation. It is policy of the place. Provision, not performance. You move slowly, not because you need to accomplish anything, but because motion has a softness when it is spare. Fingers trace the edge of a paperback on the shelf. The title is familiar, but the page you remember is not exact, and the uncertainty is not discomforting. On a lower shelf, a photograph is tucked between a stack of magazines. You tilt it, not to interrogate the faces, but to feel the quiet presence of the day captured there. The picture has been taken in a room much like this one. Low light, an off-center lamp, things placed with an economy that signals ease. The people in the photo are leaning into each other in a way that does not call attention. Not everything need be declared to be known. There is a softness to the fabrics under your skin. The sweater you tug at is a familiar weight, the hem of it worn where you rub your thumb along it when you are thinking. The cushion under your head has the slightest dip from another evening, an evidence of the ways people make space for each other without announcing it. These domestic imprints are not theatrical. They do not sulk for notices. They simply are, and your body remembers, without having to articulate the reasons. Outside, a window pane holds the faint glow of a neighbor's television, a rectangle that goes on and off, like a small, indifferent heartbeat. Inside, an incense stick smolders somewhere with a pale, unobtrusive scent that blends with the neutral soap and the faint hint of the city in the air. The combined smell is not a signature so much as the room's way of being itself. It is an atmosphere of habitation. not of performance. Nothing here asks you to explain why you like this particular combination of smells, or why you let your sweater dry on the radiator sometimes. The room accumulates choices, it does not quiz them. There are small economies of care at work in the space. A pair of shoes tucked neatly by the door, laces loosely tied, an extra blanket folded on the armchair, a jar of pens in the kitchen drawer that collects receipts and gum wrappers as if to say, everything is useful in its own time. These are signs of a life made up of marginal necessities. Some of them practical, some of them sentimental, all of them resting. Even the lamp's dimmer, set one notch above the lowest glow, feels like a chosen compromise between darkness and too much brightness. The room's lighting is an agreement among things about how much clarity is required. You feel the particular steadiness that comes from being in a place that knows you. The walls are not blank, they are scrawled with small stories. A poster whose corner curls, a print leaning on a shelf instead of being hung, a ticket stub in a tin labeled miscellany. Each item is a consequence of decisions that were private and gentle, none of them awaiting justification. The absence of necessity to explain is a kind of luxury that does not demand to be named. It is embodied in the tilt of a lamp, in the way the cushions accept your weight. That quiet entitlement to be uninterrogated is precious and ordinary all at once. You might pick up a sweater that has belonged to someone else for a while, and notice the faint scent at the collar. It does not provoke a narrative, only a remembered tilt toward warmth. You might run a finger along the rim of an empty mug and find the little groove where the glaze is uneven, evidence of something made by hand or merely slightly imperfect, as many of the things you hold are. The imperfections in the room are not problems, they are invitations to ease, to let the small, unremarkable details stand as they are. There is a neighbor's laughter spilling softly from a window across the way, and it settles into the room like a borrowed chord. It does not require participation, it is simply present. Your breathing matches the steadiness of the lamp's light, slow and quiet. The existence of an extra plate in the cabinet suggests someone else may come by, or once did, or might again, and you allow the possibility to be just that. A possibility, not a demand. The pattern of living here does not hinge on explanation. It hinges on being held by the ordinary rhythms of a space that cares without commentary. As you move through the room, you find yourself taking inventory, not to categorize, but to receive. The second mug is a kind of promise unspoken. The jacket on the hook is a kind of witness. The slightly askew picture frame is a small, steady proof that cares were taken and left in place. These things make the night more gentle without requiring you to account for why. They signal that someone, perhaps no one in particular, made room, and that room exists now, whether or not you choose to name it. The house hums itself into a softer register. The lamp's circular light tightens into a personal orbit. Nothing in the room is urgent, and the feeling of belonging is implied, not negotiated. You can be here simply as you are, the slight heaviness in your limbs and the lightness in your chest, together, occupying the small, unassuming space that knows the cadence of your presence. The night holds these things for you without commentary, and in that holding, there's a kind of quiet, unvoiced companioning that needs no explanation. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You settle into the curve of the couch as if it remembers you, as if the fabric has kept a soft memory of the way your body fits here, when the lamps are low and the outside world is a blue suggestion beyond. The curtains. The lamp on the side table throws a small island of light that makes the room feel like a held breath. Steady, gentle, intentionally narrow. Shadows lean into corners and rest there, without needing to be chased away. The city beyond the window is a slow, distant rhythm. Cars like measured heartbeats, a train giving a soft note against the dark, filtered through glass and fabric until it becomes something you watch, rather than respond to. There's a mug on the coffee table that is not yours exactly. It bears a smudge of lipstick at its rim, and a faint ring where it has been set down and left. Beside it, another mug sits, half full and cooling, a small cloud of steam gone thin and quiet. The two mugs do not demand explanation. They simply exist, like companions who have finished their speaking for the night. The sight of them is comforting because it marks the kind of evening where someone else's presence can be as simple as a shared cup and the knowledge that the crumbs on the plate will be cleared later, or perhaps not. That indifference to urgency is itself a small kindness. Your hands find a book on the low shelf, not to open it and read, but to feel the texture of its spine, to count the ridges with your thumb. The book is one of many, arranged in no particular order, some leaning against each other like people in warm conversation, some stacked with the weight of repeated returns. There is a folded sweater draped over the back of a chair, its fibers softened by use. A jacket hangs on a peg near the door, the cuff turned in a way that suggests it was shrugged off in a hurry, then left to rest. Each object in the room carries a phraseless history, and that history does not require telling. It is enough to be known by the way it sits here, worn and trusted. Light touches the wooden surface of the table and warms it slightly. You press your palm to it and feel the smoothness beneath. The faint grain of time and small repairs, the air smells of gentle detergent and the residual warmth of things that have been wrapped in familiar hands. There is no sharpness in the scent, only a comfortable domestic hush that drifts in and out with each breath. Outside, the night presses coolness against the glass. The curtain flutters once, then settles, as if acknowledging the boundary between interior calm and exterior possibility. You allow your thoughts to move slowly now, like pages turning in a book left open to a passage you have read before, but do not need to memorize. Memories that linger at the edges of the day, snatches of conversation, a particular laugh, the way a shared glance landed and stayed. Come forward gently, unburdened by the need to be justified or explained. They are present in the room as quietly as the second mug, as tangible as the faint crease in the throw pillow, where you rest your head when the night lengthens. There is no demand for clarity here. The pieces that remain unsettled do not insist on resolution. They are permitted to exist as soft questions with no urgency. The rhythm of the apartment is slow and domestic. A small fan hums, keeping the air moving in an even, nonchalant way. The kettle on the stove clicks once, then goes silent. Its work done earlier, its warmth still in the metal if you press near it. On the windowsill, a plant leans toward the low light, leaves relaxed and slightly translucent. Its presence is unremarkable and therefore entirely comforting. A little life that needs nothing dramatic from you tonight. The hum of the fridge carries a companionable, low frequency, a pulse that anchors the quieter sounds into something steady and ordinary. There is a softness to the way the apartment holds you, as if the surfaces themselves were designed for small, lonely occupancies and shared conveniences. A stack of dishes sits near the sink, a quiet testimony to an earlier meal, taken together or apart, neither implication necessary. Coziness here is not curated for an audience. It is the result of accumulated, lived-in choices. Mismatched ceramics, a throw blanket that has been repaired at the corner, a lamp whose shade has a subtle scar from a clumsy night. These details do not perform. They simply are. And the lack of polish is itself a kind of intimacy. You notice the way the light catches a small photograph pinned to a corkboard, a square of paper with edges softened by time. The image shows two people leaning into each other with the kind of ease that comes from long familiarity. There is no flourish, no dramatic pose, just the quiet evidence of a particular night, a shared joke, the tilt of shoulders that fit together without explanation. The photograph is not an announcement, it is a private ledger of what has been lived. You do not feel the need to name what it is. Its presence is enough. a warmth that exists without a label. Your breathing becomes part of the room's soundscape, even and unremarkable, syncs somehow to the soft clink of a spoon against ceramic in the kitchen as someone stirs a second cup once more, then sets the spoon down. The motion is small and deliberate without urgency. It is a domestic choreography you know well. The way kettles are lit, the way coats find pegs, the way conversations soften into comfortable silences. None of it demands performance, and that is what makes the space feel like a sanctuary tonight. People can be present without being monumental. Visibility can exist without spectacle. You feel the relief of ordinary things being enough. The night does not hurry you. It invites, but does not coax. There is an absence of expectation that feels like a warm duvet draped over the chest. Not smothering, only protective. You can leave thoughts unfinished, sentences may trail and remain pleasant fragments. A message on your phone might glow and then dim, unanswered, and that absence of reply becomes unremarkable because the room holds its own kind of conversation between light and fabric, between a mug and a table, between a person and their breath. Everything here is content to be partial. At the edge of the room, the curtains pull slightly as if a breeze is passing in the alley below. Then still, the night beyond is patient. It does not propose solutions or ask for reasons. It simply allows. You notice the small relief in the idea that presence can be uncomplicated, that you can occupy a space without proving anything. The top of your chest loosens a fraction, a muscle releasing that you did not realize had been tense all day. There is a steadying quality to this, an acknowledgement that being seen, softly, fleetingly, without ceremony, does not obligate you to perform an explanation in return. There is a calendar pinned behind the door, its dates filled with tiny marks, appointments, gatherings, small commitments that sit like beads on a string. Tonight, the marks are gentle reminders rather than obligations. They fold into the room's rhythm and do not demand reevaluation. The evening's light lays a horizontal band across the rug, and you watch dust motes drift through it, tiny slow planets moving without haste. There is a sense of ordinary time stretching and widening, making room for you to breathe without needing to account for each inhale. A pair of slippers waits by the doorway, slightly askew as if someone took them off in a hurry and did not bother to arrange them symmetrically. That imperfection feels truthful. The night accepts these small inelegances and does not require their correction. You rest your feet against the carpet and feel the texture, faintly worn and pleasing to the touch. Comfort here is not about perfection. It is about the acceptance of the used and familiar. You remain in the room with these small, unremarkable things: mugs, books, a photograph, a sweater folded and waiting. The quiet deepens, not into weight, but into density. Dizekar, gentle consolidation of presence. Absence of expectation presses lightly against the edges of the evening, and, in that pressing, becomes a kind of support. You do not have to explain, you do not have to reconcile or correct. The night holds, neutral and kind, and within that hold, you find an ease that is not final, but is deeply enough. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. Your breath has its own gentle work tonight, an unremarked tide that meets the small stillness of the room and eases against it. You notice it only because it moves against other things. The thin hush of fabric at your shoulders, the subtle looseness of a sleeve you tugged aside earlier, the way the air around the lamp feels slightly warmer than the air by the window. There is no hurry in the way the breath comes or goes. It is simply present, like the lamp's soft glow, like the outline of cushions where someone sat earlier and left their imprint in that particular way that only long familiarity can make. The room holds itself in the same way. Objects that matter to you arrange themselves without ceremony. A second mug cooling on the low table, the faint ring in its saucer where it sat beside the one you drank from, a sweater folded and waiting on the back of a chair. its shoulders still curved, as if shaped by someone who wears it often. A stack of books whose spines face the light, so their titles can be read when curiosity stirs. None of it is staged. None of it asks for explanation. It is simply how you live here, the quiet grammar of a shared or solitary household that has learned to accept what is necessary and what is luxuriously small. Outside the curtains, the night moves in a different tempo. The city breathes softly beyond your glass, a distant chorus of lights and life that sounds like an agreement to let you have this hour. If your window looks toward trees, there's a slow rustling that meets the lamplight at the sill, an indifferent chorus that does not demand your notice. The room's warmth is a small, deliberate island, and your breathing reflects its steady edges. There is no obligation to narrate any of it. You let the details exist without translating them. The soft scuff of a shoe you meant to put away, the faint sheen on a wooden armrest where hands often rest, the small private map of dents and marks on the table that record ordinary nights. Sometimes you trace these things with your attention, as if reading a familiar map. The curve of a mug handle, a hairpin tucked into a book, the outline of a keychain left on the console. Each object makes a quiet claim on the evening, a presence that is unflashy and unself-conscious. There is a comfort in that unperformed domesticity. Someone else might see clutter, and you would only feel the lived-in kindness of it. The second mug, for instance, carries a soft narrative without words. It implies company that came and left, or company that remained quiet beside you, or a habit of keeping space ready for anyone who might need it. It is neither declaration nor explanation, only the aftertaste of someone's hand in a room that now rests. Light is patient here. It pools where it wants to, spilling over the edge of a table, turning the grain of wood into a muted topography. The lamp is a companion that keeps vigil without fuss. Its glow is not bright enough to demand attention, but it is enough to outline the things you care about, the books you mean to open, the notes you never meant to lose. Shadows sit against the wall, like old friends who understand the rules of conversation. A look, a pause, nothing more. The curtains hang heavy, keeping the night at a polite distance, and you enjoy the way the darkness feels porous, rather than absolute, letting in the city's soft sound, as if to remind you you are part of something larger, but not obliged to account for it. There are moments when your thoughts loosen and wander without asking permission. A sentence from a book that lodged in your mind, the memory of a laugh that belonged to a night that hasn't been neatly filed away, the small, precise memory of how a hand found yours on a bus or a bench. These thoughts arrive like guests who know they are welcome but do not insist on staying. Your breath absorbs them, an unhurried rhythm that offers space without interrogating their edges. You allow each one to exist alongside the other things in the room, the stacked dishes in the sink that will wait until tomorrow, the jacket draped where it landed, the faint scent of detergent on a folded towel. Nothing compels you to tidy or tidy your mind. The household and the interior life both remain steady. In the corner where the bookshelf leans against the wall, there are small marks of a life lived in company. A postcard with a note on the back, edges softened by hands, a borrowed novel with a sticky note peeking like a quiet secret, a candle stub in a glass jar, its wax shaped by other evenings. The traces are not conspicuous or performative. They are gestures that suggest a map of familiarity. People who came by, leaves that were tucked into a book, meals shared without fuss. You feel the texture of that map more than the outline of any particular face. It is enough to sense that the room has been shaped by others, who understand silence as a language rather than a void. There is a particular hush to the mechanics of the apartment, the soft tick of the clock that does not insist on being heard, the low hum of the refrigerator that acts like a steady bass line under everything. the faint whoosh of traffic far away that rises and falls like a slow tide. These sounds are not distractions. They are the room's neutral pulse, a countersign to your breath. When you notice them, they help you measure how quiet the night can be without being empty. They offer a gentle reassurance that things continue to function around you, that life holds its ordinary mechanisms in gentle stead. You move in small ways. A hand brushes the back of your neck, finding a place that does not insist on comfort, but recognizes it when it appears. Fingers trace the rim of the mug, feeling the warmth that remains. The sweater on the chair invites a particular memory of someone who once wore it during a rainstorm. Body tucked close to a radiator with a newspaper folded across knees. None of these recollections carry urgency. They simply sit like small, luminous things that do not demand a name. In their quiet presence, you find that the evening becomes both more alive and less like a scene that needs to be narrated. The air here is familiar, a faint mix of soap, the residual sweetness of tea, a hint of fabric softener that lingers on the curtains. Each scent is a note in a hush that neither overwhelms nor fades. They fit into the room like gentle punctuation. You do not try to parse them into meanings or memories. Instead, you let them settle into the background, companions to the steady rhythm of your breath and the patient glow of the lamp. Time seems to fold inward a little, not compressed, but generous. An expanse in which moments are allowed to extend themselves without the demand to culminate. In the quiet, you notice how steadiness can be a form of care. The light that doesn't flicker, the chair that holds the shape of someone who leaned there last week, the mug that cools but remains at hand. It feels like a slow conversation between small things. The lamp offering warmth, the sweater offering weight, the books offering invitation. You are part of this exchange only insofar as you are present to observe it. There is no need to explain why any of it matters. It simply does. A soft network of belonging that requires no labels, no announcements, no proof. You let it be, and your breath keeps its quiet, faithful rhythm, meeting the room and leaving it unchanged, steady, exactly as it needs to be. You sit with the lamp low, the bulb throwing a small, steady pool of light across the worn surface of the table. The paint there is smooth from years of hands brushing it, from cups set down and picked up again, from the habitual slide of a sleeve. The rest of the room is softened into edges, the curtains holding back the night with a faint, even weight. Outside there is a distant shimmer of streetlight and the occasional muted movement of a city that belongs to another level of awake. Inside, the air is steady, the kind that carries the faint, familiar scent of laundry soap and the slow, clean warmth of human presence. Your thoughts come and go without force. One will arrive, a memory of a lap blanket pulled up tightly, or a hand that once straightened the curtain because the draft wanted to be noticed, and then it will soften into something else. As if language itself is a soft fabric, you let fold without smoothing. Details gather at the edges of attention, the second mug, on the counter with the ring of dried tea at the bottom, the folded shirt on the back of the chair that still holds the angle of the night it was worn, a book face down with a corner dog-eared. None of these items demand explanation. They are simply there, quiet as consent. Your fingers find the rim of the mug nearest you and trace the cool curve. The ceramic has a tiny nick along the lip, where it was dropped once and then kept. Kept because its imperfection has become part of how it fits your hand. There is comfort in objects that remember being used rather than being kept pure. You notice the faint warmth that pools beneath the holder, the warmth left like a small private afterglow. That warmth does not ask for meaning. It sits, unremarkable, and you let it be. A song ends somewhere on a playlist you no longer need to watch. It leaves a hush that is not empty. It is full of the tiny sounds of a lived room, the soft tick of an old clock, the fridge's occasional low hum, the fabric of the couch settling. These sounds are layered and domestic, like the overlapping patterns of conversation that have happened here before, the low, easy exchanges that require no introduction. The home has a memory of hands and steps, and the particular cadence of laughter that used to come through the door at some hour, sometimes late. Those memories are not explained. They are simply shapes in the dark. You are aware of the weight of the blanket across your knees. The texture is familiar, the weave gentle under your palms. It is not wrapped for warmth so much as for company. The way an object can be companionable, a present shape to relieve the attention of having to watch yourself all the time. Somewhere near the window, a jacket hangs over a chair, with the quiet dignity of something that has been used and then left, not abandoned but given a rest. The jacket holds a faint scent, soap and a particular cologne or perhaps the tang of rain, and for a moment, associations rise without urgency. A memory of shared errands, of shoulders brushing in a doorway. The scene is simple and not declarative. It settles without needing a conclusion. You allow the mind to drift into small reveries. An image of a folded note tucked into a book, a bouquet with one stem slightly crumpled. The way the light falls across the floor and makes a slow, pale rectangle that moves as the hour passes. Each fragment is gentle and open-ended. There is no pressure to assemble them into a story that proves something. Instead, each detail becomes an island of sense that you can visit and leave as you please. Meaning, for now, is optional. It is permissible to notice without interpreting, to hold a memory like a small stone in the palm and feel its smoothness without needing to tell its history aloud. You notice the hush of the radiator as it cools, the faint metallic exhale of old pipes. There is a domestic rhythm here, a measured pulse that does not hurry. It feels like being allowed to occupy a moment with both quiet weight and lightness. You think of a pair of keys by the door with a worn spot where a thumb has rubbed them raw, the imprint of habitual motion. These traces are the opposite of spectacle. They are the private work of living, the ways a life leaves marks that are not meant for display, but for comfort. They suggest a life that has made room for itself and for others, without the need for announcement. A memory arrives that is thin at the edges, a kitchen table strewn with mismatched plates after a long, slow meal, a song hummed under breath while rinsing a glass, the soft conversation that doesn't require full sentences. It spreads like breath against glass, visible and then gone, leaving only the slightly steamed imprint. The partial recollection does not press for cohesion. It rests in that thin place where feelings are present but not insisted upon, where tenderness does not require naming. It is enough that the scene happened, that the body remembers the aftertaste of wine and laughter without needing to keep score. Your attention sometimes slips into the body, the steadiness of breath, the way the shoulders hang, the small ticks of muscle responding to the night. There is no evaluation, only observation. The body is a familiar landscape, dotted with traces of the day, a faint ache at the base of the neck, the softness of the palms after washing hands with soap that smells slightly floral. You notice the smallness of such things, how they feel anchored in the present without demanding anything from you. They are simply part of the ongoing quiet. Outside, the moonlight washes the curtain in a pale, careful way. It's a light that knows enough to be modest, to give shape without insisting on definition. It softens the room's edges, makes everything easier to look at without clarity. You enjoy that gentleness. There is a peculiar freedom in things that are partially seen. The mind can linger without being required to tidy up the impression, to file it away under precise headings. Things can be both known and unknown at once, and that uncertainty is a kind of relief. Your mind wanders to other small domestic scenes. Someone's shoes lined up by the door, a pen left uncapped on the bedside table, the slight crease in a pillow from where a head rested once. These are not dramatic items. They do not demand stories or explanations. They embody a kind of intimacy that is private and ordinary, an intimacy that has nothing to prove. It is the quiet of companionship held in objects and routines, the way a spoon fits in the same spot in the drawer, the way a lamp is always turned off with a certain hand gesture. These habits are signatures of care that do not need to be recounted. You let thoughts tumble like small stones across a shallow stream. Some sink quickly, some skip and wobble. The mind takes them as they come. There is a softness in how attention moves, a patient, unhurried drift that acknowledges feeling without corralling it into narrative. It is a permission to be present with fragments, images, sounds, textures that make no demand to be more than they are. Meaning, in this hour, becomes an accessory rather than a requirement. The room keeps its steady warmth. The lamp holds its small, loyal circle of light. Objects continue their quiet conversation of use and memory. You inhabit this place as if you have always been welcome here, not because everything is resolved, but because resolution is not the point. Here, in this evening, the need to explain dissolves into the clear, patient pleasure of being among things and sensations that fit. You remain with the simple comfort of not having to clarify any of it, letting the night keep what it will, and leaving the rest uninsisted upon. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You notice the way the lamp pool sits on the table like a small harbor, soft-edged and steady. The light rests on a stack of books, on a thin scattering of postcards, on the pale rim of a second mug that has been left to cool. There is a hush to the objects here, not emptiness, but a kind of generous waiting. The room remembers the day in its folds and flat surfaces. A cardigan is folded across the back of a chair, not placed with ceremony, but with the ease of bodies that belong in the same rooms. The sleeves have grown familiar to your hands. They fit the shape of a shoulder. You think of briefly, and then let go of, because the night asks no accounting. Outside the curtains is a darker temperature. You notice the difference without needing to measure it. The window glass keeps the night at arm's length, but the city, if it is the city beyond your sill, breathes in a slow, dim rhythm. A distant traffic line is like a low throat clearing. A bird, unlikely, has settled somewhere far off. The muffled sounds are almost polite in how they do not insist. Inside, surfaces are softened by the attentions of many small years. A plant leaning a little toward the lamp. A coaster ring on the table, where a mug once rested more regularly. The faint scent of detergent that has been worn into linen and becomes a kind of neutral memory. You move slowly through the room, letting your hands find things without urgency. Fingers trace the book spines, pausing at a title that once mattered and now simply fits with the others. You sit on the couch, and the cushions accept you with a slight remembering squeeze. There is a pair of socks folded near the armrest that someone else left behind intentionally, or maybe absent-mindedly. Either way, they feel like evidence of unremarked care. The second mug sits a little askew from the coaster, a quiet small rebellion of domestic life. You hold the cool ceramic and listen to the small, steady hum of the refrigerator, the building settling into itself, the lamp's filament that seems to breathe its own small heat into the room. Your thoughts here are allowed to loosen, to lose their edges and tumble like soft things into a bowl. They do not demand neatness, they come as impressions, a flash of light on the glass, the weight of fabric in your hands, a memory of an exchange earlier in the day that now feels less sharp because the night has a way of diluting the need to be exact. You trace the scar on the banister without naming the event that caused it, simply acknowledging the raised line like a piece of geography on a map. There is room for small raggedness in this house, and that room makes your chest expand in an unguarded way. There is a presence in the air that is not a person. It is the accumulation of people and meals and late conversations that do not demand tidy endings. The aroma of something that once simmered maybe a stew, maybe a slow-cooked sauce, rests on the curtains, mixing with the sharpness of citrus from a dish soap. The scent is unremarkable and intimate, like shared apartments and kitchens that have learned each other's rhythms. You do not catalog it, you simply notice that your shoulders soften at the recognition. You think about the visible parts of you that were present today, the gestures that felt brave, simply because they were small and honest. You let the feeling exist without making a list or a speech. It sits alongside the other textures in the room. There is no pressure here to translate what it meant. Instead, there is an envelope of warmth that holds those small acts and lets them be luminous without demanding more. It is the quality of a quiet room that has accepted all of its history and does not try to tidy away the complicated threads. A lamp throws a gentle arc across a photograph on the mantel. The faces there are blurred in the way photographs often are, affectionate, uncontrived, somewhere between posed and candid. You allow yourself to trace the contours of those smiles with your mental hand. It is not necessary to explain why they are there. The photograph is a piece of the house's memory, one of many small tributes to the people who have passed through these rooms and left a line of warmth. That warmth is not a demand. It is a permission, subtle and quiet, to be present without performance. The curtains have a weight that you appreciate now, the way they fold back the world and let the room keep its own temperature. Sometimes you lift them only enough to let in a slice of the night sky, and the way the distant light moves feels like a private conversation between the room and whatever is beyond it. You do not press your nose to the glass as if you must prove anything. Instead, you watch a single streetlight bloom and recede through the curtain fabric, a small pulse that does not require explanation. In the kitchen, there are dishes stacked with a kind of casual order, not rushed but not fussed over either. A spoon rests in a glass, leaning against its rim, like a small flag. The arrangement says that the day was lived and has been gently set aside. You move toward the counter and find your fingers tracing a worn wood grain where someone once leaned to reach a shelf. The gesture feels like a conversation without words. You do not recount what was said or decide what it meant. You simply notice how the counter has softened under repeated touch, the way the corner rounds with years. You allow quiet attention to spread through your limbs. There is no checklist to complete, no response required. The night permits you to be a mosaic of small experiences. Even the moments that once demanded explanation are allowed to exist as textures, a slight tightness in the throat, the memory of an awkward exchange, a satisfaction in a job well placed. Each one is held without insistence. They do not need to be unified into a single coherent story. They are islands of feeling that the room accommodates. The lamp hums a tiny domestic note. You adjust the light with your fingers as if tuning a handheld radio. The bulbs throw no harsh glare. Shadows pool in the corners and become part of the furniture, companion pieces rather than gaps. You notice how the shadows keep certain things private, not by force, but by an unassuming agreement. The privacy is a gentle architecture. It allows distraction to ebb. Your attention, having been busy during daylight, now softens, spreads like water finding a level. Your hands find a blanket folded at the arm of the chair. The fabric is textured in a way that speaks of season and sisterhood, not adornment. You unfold it slowly, letting the weave catch against your skin. The weight is pleasant. It is not meant to smother or rescue. It is simply a familiar element that sits with you. The kind of thing that makes a room feel lived in, not staged. There is a second mug on the table. You set your own next to it. The two mugs do not have to be part of a narrative. Their proximity suggests that other people share this space or have shared this space, and that there is a continuity to the small acts of making and leaving things where they can be found. You think about words you might have used earlier, about explanations you might once have prepared for such moments. None of them are needed now. The night has a way of holding rather than interrogating. It balances attention evenly across a room's surfaces, so that nothing feels singled out, nothing feels required to perform. There is a kind of relief in being allowed to be partial, to be multiple, to be composed of small contradictory details that do not require harmonizing. Your breath is a soft metronome. The hum of appliances, the far-off city, the lamp's light, the weight of a blanket, all combine into a field that neither demands nor denies. You sit in the center of this soft geometry and find that the edges of perception have loosened into a tender blur. Thoughts arrive like driftwood, some buoyant, some waterlogged. You do not reach for them. You let the room hold them, the way it holds a mug on a coaster or a cardigan on a chair. There is a gentle impartiality to the night here. Everything is allowed to be as it is. The lamp on the side table throws a small oval of amber across the coffee table, and the rest of the room receives that light like an old friend. You notice the way the light softens the edges of things, the stack of books, the mug with a thin ring at the bottom, the way the knit blanket pulls over the arm of the sofa. These are ordinary objects that have learned to live together in this apartment. Nothing is arranged for effect, nothing polished for visitors. The place keeps its familiar rhythms, and you move inside them without needing to say anything about how you arrived here or why you linger. Your hand rests on the fabric of the blanket, and it is a small, steady warmth. The weave is slightly loose in one place, a place of mending where a thumb once caught, and somebody threaded their needle without hurry. That repair sits there like a quiet conversation you were only partly present for, and you let the memory of it exist without unpacking it. The sound of the building settling is distant and patient, pipes whispering, the refrigerator murmuring on the other side of the wall, a late tram easing by so gently that its presence is more suggestion than sound. You breathe with those soft exhalations and count your breath only because it keeps time with the night. You can see a second mug on the shelf, an empty curve of ceramic that still smells faintly of lemon tea. It sits beside a cookbook with splattered margins and a stack of postcards from a place you visited once with someone who left the postcards and the leftover crumbs of a visit in a careful heap on the windowsill. Their handwriting embroidered the back of one card in a small, decisive script. Nothing big, just a few words that meant nothing formal and everything intimate. You do not reread the message. You let the presence of the handwriting be like a second light in the room, a soft, companionable glow that does not demand interpretation. The windows hold the night in a flat, cool glass. Beyond them, a loose constellation of apartment windows answers with different temperatures of light. A rectangle of blue where someone watches something alone, a strip of orange where curtains remain drawn, the tiny vertical stripe where a street lamp throws itself on a neighboring wall. The night beyond the glass does not probe at you. It offers space, a kind of neutral, patient width that you can step into without performing anything. The curtains hang heavy and thick, a kind of domestic curtain call that keeps the interior to itself. You find that privacy is less a barricade here than a knownness, a way that the room listens and keeps silent. A jacket is draped over the back of a chair. It carries the faint, habitual scent of another person. Soap, a hint of rain from earlier, a little grocery store coffee. Those scents are not an announcement. They are evidence that life has been allowed into the room in a low, unregulated way. The jacket's cuff is folded the precise way someone always folds cuffs, and the familiarity of that fold is a comfort. It does not require you to explain who folded it or why it hangs there. Its presence is simply true, and you let that truth sit beside whatever else is true about the night. On the bookshelf, an old photograph leans against a row of spines. The image is winked at you, often enough to feel like a small ritual. A laugh, caught in a half shadow, an arm around a shoulder that fits exactly where it wants to be. There is no need to catalog the people in the photo or to describe the laughter. The photograph performs the same function as the lamp and the blanket and the second mug. It holds a shape of belonging that is neither loud nor formal. You trace the rim of the mug with your thumb, and the memory of that half laugh moves through you without asking for a narrative. The playlist on the small speaker is paused mid-song, where a voice has tapered into a phrase that feels private, low and careful and almost self-directed. The pause itself is restful, like a hand placed gently over the music to keep it from spilling into the night. You are not obliged to pick up the song. Let it pause. Let it remain like a thought uncompleted, pleasantly unfinished. The neighbor's quiet television, muffled and anonymous, provides a distant counterpoint. Someone else's late evening that neither intrudes nor insists. The room in which you are sitting is its own private weather system, with microclimates of feeling that shift in the absence of explanation. There are folded clothes on the chair near the door, a neatness that suggests someone left in mid-decision and came back later, or never did decide at all. The hem of a shirt is soft from repeated washes, a button is slightly loose, and the thought that you might sew it down sits beside other, gentler thoughts. You think of how ordinary domestic care can be a kind of tenderness. Mending a button, refolding a shirt, leaving the kettle to cool where it stands. It is not a public tenderness. It is the private, small-scale attentiveness of people who know each other's edges and do not make spectacle of the knowledge. That familiarity is a language spoken quietly in this apartment, by folded hems, by the chosen mug, with a tiny chip at the rim, by socks tucked under the sofa cushion, like small, pragmatic artifacts. The lamp shades the room into layers. Closest to the lamp is the table with its little ring marks and a pen that always rolls to the same place. Farther out, the sofa and the bookshelf and the window trade in gentler shadows. The night moves across these plains with a slow, deliberate pace that does not ask for an accounting of your day. You can hold the residue of visibility, or the residue of an argument, or the residue of a laugh, without having to explain it. These residues are like settled dust on the mantle, visible, textured, not needing clearance. Presence is allowed to be unexamined here in a way that feels, if not effortless, at least spare of performance. You find your attention drawn to small domestic rituals that do not perform for anyone. The act of setting your cup on the coaster, the way your fingers smooth the blanket unconsciously, the sound of the zipper when you tuck the jacket onto the back of the chair. Each tiny movement is an ownership of the night that requires no commentary. Nothing in the apartment is brighter than it needs to be. Nothing in the apartment is framed as evidence. The room's atmosphere is private and generous at once, a kind of tacit permission to exist in the present without explanation. Outside, an intermittent wind slides across the street, collecting the faint smells of late meals, of damp pavement, of someone walking home with a paper bag. The city makes a low, sustained sound that is not noise so much as context. It is a reminder that the world keeps turning in unremarked ways, and that within that motion, your small interior remains its own thing. Inside, the light keeps tracing things you know well. You watch how familiar objects hold their positions like patient witnesses, and you let the fact of them be more important than any story you might tell about them. The night encourages a form of quiet attendance. It does not demand confession. It does not put your feelings on display. It gives you the comprehension of company at a distance. The knowledge that other lives move in adjacent rooms and different time zones. That someone else once left a sweater here, and someone else will leave tomorrow. You feel held without ceremony by the plainness of domestic detail, by a chair that knows where you sit, by a lamp that is the same as it has always been, by a playlist paused between two lines of lyric. The absence of explanation becomes a kind of allowance, and you rest in that allowance, noticing the smaller textures of the night. rather than trying to make large statements about them. There is a softness in this, in the light, in the linen, in the quiet arrangement of things that have been used and loved and left in a shape that makes sense to the people who live here. You move through the room slowly, as if your steps might disturb a pattern that has been worked out over time. You are allowed to be what you are without commentary, without the need to translate or to justify. The apartment receives you with an unassuming welcome. In that reception, there is a calmness that belongs neither to booming declarations nor to erasure. It is simply enough. The steady, low hum of life continuing, the small evidences of chosen company, the layers of lamplight and shadow that make a private world. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You sit in the center of familiar light, the small lamp on the side table making a soft pool that keeps the rest of the room in gentle suggestion. The edges of things are not sharp tonight. The books on the shelf have become a single, comforting block. The stack of folded laundry is simply a soft, horizontal plane beside the arm of the chair. Around you, the night organizes itself into textures more than objects, and those textures fold into each other until distinctions feel less necessary. There is a second mug on the coffee table, a small reassurance that the room shares its history. It carries the faint ring of a day just completed, an imprint of where a hand rested, the coolness of what once held something hot. You do not narrate that presence, you only register it. The air between the two mugs keeps more than their outlines. It holds a small, quiet weight, the memory of conversation that arrived and then settled, the leftover warmth from a voice you heard earlier, something that does not ask to be explained and therefore does not require a response. Touch comes as slow information. Your fingers find the seam of the throw, draped over your knees, and follow it like reading a line of small, private punctuation. The fabric is slightly rough in the way well-used things are, softened by familiarity. When you press your palm against the wooden arm of the chair, you feel the faint coolness that lingers from earlier hours, and that coolness is neither intrusive nor urgent. It is simply part of the room's punctuation. The textures layer without competing, the smoothness of the mug, the grain of the wood, the fabric's small naps. They do not demand you pick one and name it. They are content to exist in parallel. Sound wraps around the space like a gentle shawl. There is a hum, less a machine, and more the building settling, the city a distant low chorus beyond the curtains. It is not a narrative that wants your attention. Instead, it becomes an evenness that supports the quiet inside you. Breaths, your own and the house's, find the same slow rhythm. Occasionally, a faint metallic ping travels through the walls and then fades back into the soft chorus, like a small note that does not change the melody. These noises do not puncture the evening. They remind you that presence is not always a single bright thing. Sometimes it is many soft things layered together. Light here is intimate rather than directional. It pools on the tabletop. It spills along the edge of the sofa. It creates a thin, bright line where the curtains meet the window frame. The night beyond is cool and uncomplicated, a dark fabric that makes the interior safe to inspect for a little while longer. The lamplight does not ask you to make sense of anything. It simply reveals what is already known. A chipped coaster with a tiny crescent moon of wear, the way a particular painting leans a fraction to the left because someone once bumped it and decided it could stay. These small asymmetries feel calm tonight, like small proof that things remain regular without needing you to tidy them into explanations. Scent arrives as memory with no insistence. There is a faint soapiness on the air from the towel that hangs by the sink, a trace of something citrus from the dish liquid, and under those, a low warmth that is neither perfume nor sharp. It is the neutral, settled odor of rooms that have been lived in. Fabric, wood, the soft residue of breath and time. When you lean forward to pick up the mug, you notice how those scents mingle with the heat rising from the cup, weaving a moment that cannot be reduced to a single label. The combination is domestic and private, a quiet signature that says more than any name could. The attention you bring to the room feels like soft light reflected off different surfaces. You scan the space without interrogation. A jacket tossed over a chair suggests a coming and going that is casual and known. A scribbled note, tucked beneath a book, hints at conversation that didn't need to be rehearsed. A pair of slippers near the doorway points to rituals that are small and exacting in their own way. All these things are evidence of lives in motion, and they hold you without asking for stories. They simply are, and in that being, they provide a kind of companionship that is unperformed and steady. Your thoughts tonight behave the way the room behaves. They fold and overlap instead of demanding singular attention. A line from an earlier exchange nudges against an image of the streetlight through the curtains. A memory of laughter softens and becomes almost tactile, like the way the blanket contours to your knees. You notice feelings the way you notice the textures under your hand, not as events that require unpacking, but as sensations that sit in the room with you. They are allowed to be present and undramatic, to exist as part of the evening's fabric. Time here is measured by small transitions rather than clocks. You feel the way one breath lengthens while the hum outside deepens, how the lamplight shifts its angle as if to settle more contentedly on the tabletop. This movement is slow and almost indifferent to meaning. It simply marks the progression of the night. The room does not hurry you toward conclusion. It offers space for the edges of things to blur, the boundary between what you thought earlier and what feels comfortable now, the line between the private and the shared, the seam where the city's distant pulse meets the quiet rhythm inside. The comfort of chosen domesticity lingers without being proclaimed. A scarf over the banisters still carries the warmth of another's shoulder, and a spoon with a trace of jam rests in the sink, as if simply paused mid-task. These small traces do not demand explanation. They exist like benign annotations, quietly attesting to the fact that lives intersect and then return to their own stillness. That familiarity, the knowledge of how someone else arranges a cup on a saucer, the specific angle they prefer for the reading lamp, creates a kind of safety that feels unspoken. It is privacy as shelter, and it is neither dramatic nor performative. Your body softens into the chair as the room's textures gather around you. The seams between internal and external details become less important by degrees. What you once might have felt obliged to analyze now loosens into an acceptance of merely being present. There is no impetus to tidy your feelings into neat packages. They fold into the fabric of the space, becoming part of the evening's slow, unforced composition. As distinctions mellow, the night acquires a roomy quality. Details remain. There is still a cup, a jacket, a book, but they no longer demand discreet attention. You find that sensations can coexist without competing. The cool air at the window and the lamplight on your knee become equally true. The distant, traffic, and the hum of the refrigerator exist together without hierarchy. Feelings, too, take their place among these elements. They need not be the center of the room to be noticed. There is a quiet generosity to this easing of edges. It permits experiences to be small and overlapping, to be felt without needing to be clarified. The domestic traces in the room, the second mug, the folded sweater, the bookmark left halfway through a page, offer their evidence of care quietly, and you accept them without argument. The night, for all its clarity, does not press you toward explanation. It welcomes the blending of moments, the soft interlacing of sound and scent, memory and touch, without asking you to sort where each piece belongs. You remain gently attentive and not compelled to produce meaning. The room and its glimpses of life feel like company, close enough to warm you, distant enough to let you breathe. The sensations stitched together into a slow, indistinct tapestry, and within those woven threads, you find a kind of ease that does not demand performance or proof. It simply is there, patient and unassuming, as the night continues to hold everything without needing an account. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You notice how the simple act of not having to make an argument for your skin, your gestures, your tiredness, changes the weight on your chest. The lamp by the armchair throws a soft circle of light across a cushion, across a well-read book, across the place where a second mug sat earlier and left a faint ring on the wooden table. The ring is small, ordinary, unembellished. It is a map of a moment, a presence that passed through and stayed nearby in the way things stay when they have been welcomed in a room and then left to settle. Your movements have become minimal and deliberate, like someone who has practiced not having to prove anything. Fingers, when they reach, find the textures that already know them. The worn edge of the couch arm, the cool rim of the ceramic mug, a blanket folded at the foot of the sofa that smells slightly of lavender and the detergent you both prefer, because it is neutral and familiar. There is a jacket draped over the back of a chair, its shape softened by being lived in. It is the kind of domestic trace that says someone else has been here without creating a spectacle. It asks nothing. Outside the window, the night isn't even dark that makes the city's distant lights seem like a calm scattering of fireflies. The curtains hold back the horizon and let the interior have its own weather. From time to time, a car passes on the street below, a low, unremarkable hum that reminds you of continuity. It is neither urgent nor intrusive. It is a background movement, like breathing that persists without demanding attention. You let your breath settle into that rhythm, noticing it but not elevating it into a project. You move through the apartment in the small way you always do at night, as if you are signaling to the space that you are still here and gentle. A stack of dishes sits in the sink. Later, you think. Nearby, a pair of socks lies folded, not in any particular hurry to be tended to. There is a postcard tucked between two paperbacks on the shelf, the edges softened by handling. The lamp's light pools over the spine of a journal, whose pages have been turned and turned again. The handwriting inside is as private as the spaces you keep for yourself. You do not look for revelations. You merely let your fingers brush the cover and feel the quiet gratitude for objects that have been allowed to remain simple. There is a second mug's warmth left in the air, a trace that is neither empty nor full. It carries the suggestion of a conversation that curved and bent without needing to be neatly tied together. You remember the rhythm of voices that could be honest without being loud, the way a shared silence can be its own tender thing. Those memories sit like soft cloths folded into the closet of your mind, useful, familiar, and not demanding you unpack them unless you want to. They are not explanations. They are evidence of presence. Your phone is face down on the table. It is an object that knows how to buzz and request and interrupt. Tonight it rests in a way that feels mutual. Both you and the device are given time to be still. There is no compulsion to check, no hovering need to translate what happened earlier into tidy terms. While there may have been moments that wanted to be defined, the room resists that exactness. Light catches on a bookmark that slides out of a novel. The bookmark is bent in the same places. It was bent yesterday, and you like that consistent imperfection. There is a small lamp on the kitchen counter, left on a dim setting, enough to peel the edges of the night, but not bright enough to insist on clarity. Your hands find the blanket at the end of the couch. It is heavy in the way of something woven with attention, and it holds the smell of other nights like a photograph. You wrap it around your shoulders without ritual, a motion so small it almost disguises itself as instinct. The fabric molds to you, and you realize that the act of making room for comfort is not always a grand gesture. Sometimes it is a collection of tiny, unobserved choices. The room looks exactly like it does after people have been staying here for a while. Mugs in two places, a drawer left slightly ajar, a single pair of shoes by the door that do not match and therefore do not need an explanation. A lamp switch clicks softly when you adjust it, and the click seems to signal permission to loosen the day's architecture of explanations and just be where you are. You let your shoulders drop, as if some invisible weight had been suspended there for hours and now can be set on a shelf. The lamp's glow carves the air into familiar shapes: the curve of the chair, the horizontal edge of the bookshelf, the faint outline of the city beyond the curtains. These shapes are not demands. They do not ask for justification. They are simply aspects of your domestic world, available for whatever you need, even if that need is only to exist without elaboration. A paperback lies open on the coffee table, the page marker slipped in and waiting. You open the book not to extract meaning, but to enjoy the texture of someone else's sentences, the movement of language that can accompany the night without forcing interpretation. Words spill across the page like steps taken at a slow pace, landing one after another, steady and unfussy. They feel like the kind of company that doesn't require you to explain what kind of company you prefer. You let them be the backdrop to your breathing. There are small domestic rituals that hold an intimate language of their own. A coaster left slightly askew, a teacup gently rinsed and left to dry, a scarf folded with care and left on the banister. These things say the same thing in various quiet tones. This place was used, and that usage was tender. They speak of makeshift arrangements and of the permission to be imperfect. The permission granted not by a proclamation, but by the very act of staying. You notice that the air tastes faintly of lemon cleansers and the memory of someone else's perfume, both softened by distance. The scents are not invasive. They stack and mingle like memories that don't demand explanation. You extend your legs, feeling the give of the sofa. There is no sense of needing to perform ease. Ease arrives like a neighbor who drops by without fanfare, sits in the other chair, and says nothing. You both enjoy the silence as if it were a shared dessert. The night outside seems to expand and let the interior breathe more fully, as if privacy were a kind of shelter that does not require you to sign a receipt. Inside, the lights are low enough to make ordinary objects look like relics of a calm ritual: a magnet on the fridge in the shape of a tiny boat, a plant whose leaves have been trimmed and placed in a mason jar of water, a candle stub that holds the memory of bright wax and borrowed laughter. You think about the movement that reduces to what feels instinctively comfortable. It is not the absence of care, but the presence of a kind of unforced cadence: lowering a book, smoothing a blanket, setting a mug down so it does not make a ring. These small choices are a language no one must parse. They accumulate into a texture of being that feels like being held gently by a room that knows you without needing a manual. There is nothing to defend here. There is nothing to announce. There is simply the slow, unpressured acknowledgement of presence. Yours, the furniture's, the night's. The evening moves without pressing for resolutions. The lighted lamp, the second mug's faint ring, the jacket on the chair. They are all arguments against urgency. They remind you that nights can be simple and entire in themselves. You remain in the soft light, the steady hum of the building accommodating itself to the hour, and the layout of objects that have learned to live together. Your breathing follows the low cadence of the place. You allow yourself to be small into the way that rooms encourage, not diminished, but compacted into a comfortable scale. You notice the ease with which you occupy the space, how the room's hush makes room for the hush inside you. There is a kind of clarity that comes from not having to account for anything. It is unspoken and unadvertised. You sit with it, pocketing the quiet like a small practical thing you might use later. Outside, night keeps its own company. Inside, the apartment keeps yours. The two kinds of quiet don't need translation to coexist. You breathe, and the air answers, steady and unremarkable and wholly sufficient. The lamp by the armchair casts a warm oval across the rug, and you notice how the light falls without asking anything of you. It simply sets down its small, steady shape and allows whatever is already here to be seen in that gentle circle. You let your gaze rest on the edges of the pool of light, a stack of books with their spines softened by handling, the corner of a quilt folded over the back of the chair, a second mug cooling on a coaster, ring of a conversation that has settled into the table. These objects keep their ordinary claims on the night. They do not push you toward explanation. They exist. You exist alongside them. There is an evenness to the way the room breathes. The walls remember the weight of long evenings. The curtains remember hands that have tugged them closed. And the lamp remembers being turned on at this hour many times. The hum of city life beyond the glass is distant, a slow river under the window. And when you tilt your face toward the window pane, you see a soft smear of light where a street lamp holds its place. The glass cools your cheek like a thought that has been allowed to rest. You notice the texture of the sill, the faint groove where fingers have traced, and the memory of other nights sits there without demand. There is a safe domesticity in small things. A sweater draped over a chair like a quiet body, a pair of shoes pushed together by the door, a folded towel with a faint scent of lavender. These traces of living do not require explanation. They are evidence of a life that is complex and ongoing, fragments that gather meaning without the daily insistence to justify or define. You move slowly through the space with an inward attention, feeling how your edges soften when nothing asks you to prove anything. The room holds you in a way that does not clamor for answers. On the shelf, a photograph rests in a plain frame. It is not a moment that demands recollection. It simply sits, a soft echo of a night, some other time. The faces are lit by laughter that belongs to a different present, and the image offers a kind of companionable silence. You study the photograph not to narrate who is in it or why it matters, but because it is a familiar weight on the shelf, an artifact of trust and ordinary belonging. There is no pressure to translate what it means. It is allowed to be what it is. Your hands find the texture of the blanket at your knees. The fabric has the faint friction of repeated use, fibers that have known other hands and other rests. There is comfort in an object that carries memory without demanding it be unpacked. You smooth the blanket, feeling the soft give under your palms, and notice the warmth that lingers where it has been touched before. The night presses gently against the windowsill, and the room answers with a low, steady glow. The balance between inside and outside is without question tonight. It is enough to be contained by this light. There is the leftover cup on the table, rim stained with where someone else paused and set it down. In his fecund, spoon lies nearby, dulled by habit. The presence of these objects suggests that someone else moved through this apartment a while ago, that another rhythm intersected yours. You feel that intersection as a quiet comfort rather than a demand. The evidence of having been seen earlier, eyes meeting, a hand held for a moment, the exchange of something that needed no label, settles into the furniture. It becomes part of the evening's architecture, an unspoken layer that softens the room. Your breath keeps a slow, even pace, and you notice the way your shoulders find a place of release. The self that has been doing its work through the day, the part that negotiates, that performs, that explains, becomes less insistent. It does not vanish. It moves toward the edges, quieter, allowing other parts to come forward. There is a calmness in that retraction, like curtains drawing back slightly to make room for a different light. You watch the shifting without surprise, the quiet that follows visibility is not empty. It is layered and considerate, like a shared room where everyone understands the etiquette of being gentle. The room carries a hum of ordinary care, a small patch of sunlight trapped in a photograph, a faint scent of detergent on a pillowcase, the soft squeak of the floorboard near the kitchen where a plant sits in the evening. Each sound and scent is small and precise. They are reminders that life continues into these domestic gestures, that intimacy can be found in the simple repetition of daily tasks. You do not need to sum up their meaning. They are present, and that presence is enough. You turn your attention to a notebook on the coffee table, its edges frayed from being carried and folded. There are pages where pen marks trail off into the margin, thoughts that were started and then set down. You do not reach to read them. The book's existence is itself a kind of safety, a promise that private things can be contained without exhibition. That promise feels like company tonight. There is a relief in having your personal edges respected by the room, in that no one here will demand explanation or an account of yourself. Outside, the night moves with a gentle agency. A breeze stirs the curtains, and for a moment, the pattern of shadow on the wall changes. You watch the slow migration of shapes and feel an uncomplicated pleasure in how easily the room adapts to this small shift. The curtains are a kind of threshold that keeps the world at a patient distance. It is enough that their fabric responds to the wind. You notice the quiet interplay of movement and stillness, how the curtains and the lamp and your presence form a small, abiding ecosystem. There is the memory of words spoken earlier that were not meant to be cataloged or resolved. They linger in the air, not as unfinished business, but as gentle resonance. You feel them as warmth rather than a question. The memory sits somewhere between your breath and the lamp's light, softening the edges of things. It becomes part of the night's texture, an unpoliced offering that needs no further negotiation. You allow your thoughts to unspool in small loops, coming close to certain memories and then letting them drift. The mental quiet is not an absence, but a reordering. It privileges small sensations: the weight of the blanket, the cool rim of the mug, the way the lamp makes a cozy pool on the rug. You notice how easy it is to be here when nothing wants anything from you. The night simply accommodates. There is a sense of continuity in the room. Objects that have been arranged by habit, a cadence of small rituals that do not demand articulation. The evening holds you with a patient kind of tenderness. You move through it like someone who knows the place intimately, who recognizes the particular ways it offers shelter. The apartment, with its soft light and layered textures, is a steady witness. It keeps a space where your presence is allowed to be quieter without needing to disappear. The hush deepens into a comfortable stillness. You feel a kinship with the things around you, an intimacy made not by declarations but by shared silence. There is no finality here, only an ongoing, unpressured companionship that stays with you as the night settles further. You remain in the room, measured and measured again by the unassuming rhythms of light, fabric, and breath. The space does not ask for explanation. It keeps you, gently as you are. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. The lamplight has settled into the same careful shape it has every night you have let it. It pulls across the low table, catches the soft edges of a book, left open face down, as if the page simply chose to rest there for a while. You notice the way the light softens the grain of the wood, how a knot looks like a small private map. The rest of the room holds its breath around that pool, shelves made, slightly crooked by the weight of their contents. A stack of postcards with handwriting on the back. You read earlier and then place back in a different order. A jacket draped over the back of the chair, where someone might put it when they arrive, because the chair is already part of an ongoing conversation. Nothing is staged. Everything is as it has been for a while. and that familiarity itself is a kind of lullaby. You let your fingers move along the rim of the mug beside you, the coolness at the outside, the faint warmth, still resting inside from tea or something thick and herbal. There is a second mug across the table, a small ring of steam long gone. The scent of citrus just there at the edge when you bring your face near. The presence of that second vessel is not an announcement. It is simply evidence of time spent in company earlier, an ordinary trace of another body having been here, the quiet imprint of shared attention. The room keeps both mugs without comment. They sit like small, patient witnesses. Sound is a distant thing tonight. Outside, something moves. Cars with careful tires. A rhythm of footsteps that becomes part of the room's periphery. The city breathes a few blocks away. Not insistently, but like an animal that knows the route home. The hum of the refrigerator is a steady, unobtrusive companion. The soft, mechanical rounding of another living thing in the building. Between these low noises, there is generous silence, layered rather than empty. A silence that seems to make room for the small things. The subtle creak when the radiator cools. The hush when the curtains shift with the draft. The soft clink of a spoon set back in a saucer earlier. It is a silence that does not demand explanation. It allows the shape of your thoughts to widen without squeezing them. You notice how the fabrics feel different under your fingers. The blanket at the end of the couch is a habit, folded with a crease that remembers the weight of your shoulders from a dozen evenings. A sweater hangs over the lamp's switch, slightly worn at the cuff. The smell of soap and the faint trace of someone else's cologne, or the memory of a shared perfume. Nothing dramatic, just a comfortable echo of another presence. The cotton of the cushion under your hand gives in the way it has learned to, and you think about the smallness of domestic things. How a chipped mug can hold an entire afternoon. How a folded shirt can be a small map of the day it came off. There is an expansiveness here that does not press or close. The room feels larger, not because objects have moved, but because your attention has loosened. Your chest eases in a way that is not about solving or editing. It is about letting the moment be exactly as it is. You observe the light on the curtains, how it pools at the hem, and then fades into the blue-black of the night beyond. The window keeps a coolness at its edges. When you press your palm to the glass, you can feel the distant temperature of the street, the kind of cold that reminds you of other nights, other routes home. You do not reach for memory as a destination. The memories are like small, quiet ornaments in the room, soft, useful things that add texture without requiring a story. There are small arrangements that speak of chosen care. A basket of keys sits near the door, some mislabeled with a ballpoint note, others blank and familiar. A folded scarf has been tucked beneath magazines, waiting as if for another arm to slip through it. A pair of boots sits slightly askew beside the apartment's threshold, one toe turned outward in the gentle way it always does. These are not tokens, no performances, merely the evidence of living with people you chose, of routines that included others and that continue to include their traces. The night here is quiet and permissive. It does not ask for anything in return, only holds the traces with the same impartial kindness as the furniture. Your thoughts move at their own unhurried pace. They wander to sentences half-formed during the day, to a text that sat longer than you expected before you sent it, to the small relief of not having to reframe anything. The night does not request a tidy ending for each thought. Instead, it allows them to exist in a kind of unedited state, with edges soft and uninsistent. You let a sentence finish without needing it to conclude you. You notice the space around it. There is room for the unfinished, for the phrases that never found a listener. There is also room for the small satisfactions that were noticed and then put aside. How a tea warmed your hands, how a laugh lasted only a breath, but brightened something stubborn. You move through the room slowly, your steps soft against the rug. Every gesture is quiet and contained. When you adjust the lamp, the light tilts and reveals another corner of the bookshelf. Books with spines that bear the slight scuffs of being read more than once, a photograph, wedged between two volumes where someone has tucked a moment away. The photograph is small, corners rounded by handling, and it holds an attitude of domestic life that is both intimate and private. You look at it for a long time because it allows a kind of gentle recognition, not for the sake of explanation, but for the sake of touch. The air is a blend of familiar scents. The faint soap you used this morning, a strip of citrus from the tea, the neutral warmth of furniture that remembers hands. Nothing in the room is new enough to surprise, and that is exactly what comforts you. The night is not asking for a performance, a summary, a justification. It simply stands alongside you like an old friend who knows that sometimes the quiet is enough. You notice, with a small relief, that is not dramatic, how ordinary rhythms, breathing, the settling of the building, the faint echo from the street, compose their own kind of lullaby. You let your attention expand, without feeling exposed. The room's edges feel generous, the small table, the armchair, the window that lets night in without forcing it to participate. In the corner, a plant leans toward the lamp as if to read the light. Its leaves are slightly dusty, but no one is concerned about a small layer of dust tonight. The plant's willingness to reach is familiar to you. You touch one leaf, and it gives beneath your fingertip, pliant and real. You do not need to catalog it. You simply notice the sensation and let it be. There is a sense of being allowed to remain unresolved. Thoughts that arrived with the day can rest on the mantle of the room without needing to be resolved into tidy claims. The quiet receives them without interrogating them. You feel seen without being asked to account for anything. That seeing is not loud or declarative. It is the steadiness of light on objects that have known each other for a long time. You sit with that steadiness and sense how the room has made space for you, not by demanding change, but by making itself reliably present. The objects around you, the shadow along the sill, the faint clatter of a distant delivery, all of it composes a gentle architecture of rest. You are allowed to unfold within it at your own pace. There is no urgency in the air, only the careful, quiet attention of the night as it keeps you company. You stay with the sound of the house breathing, with the small weight of the blanket at your knees, with the memory of another presence that is neither here nor absent, but simply part of the room's continuing pattern. Outside, a light in a distant window blinks and then steadies, and for a moment you imagine the life behind it. A kettle being set aside, a newspaper folded, a pair of feet settling onto a rug. Those images rise without pressure to belong to anything. They float like small lanterns into the periphery. Inside, the lamplight continues to hold the room, soft and uninsistent. You rest there, you, allowed to exist without explanation, in a space that feels both private and companionable, where stillness expands without closing in. The lamplight leans across the room, like an arm resting on the back of a couch, a warm, unremarkable weight that makes the familiar edges of things soften. You notice the way the light pools on the grain of the coffee table, on the small ring left by a mug that someone set down without thinking. There is a second mug, heavier than the first, perched nearer the lamp, its glaze nicked in a particular place where it has been loved a long time. The two mugs imply a conversation that has already happened, a pair of voices that settled into a rhythm, and then unraveled into silence without needing to be mended. That silence has its own texture tonight, layered, not empty, like a blanket that keeps moving until it fits. Curtains hold the dark at bay. Beyond them, the city is a distant, patient presence, a low and steady backdrop of indistinct sounds. Occasionally, a sharper tap of a tire or a soft exchange of glass on glass. Inside, the air smells of warm fabric and something freshly washed. A sweater left folded on the arm of a chair, its fibers still carrying the faint, comforting trace of soap. A jacket is thrown over a lampstand, the sleeve catching the light like a pause in a sentence you don't need to finish. There is a book face down, spine softened from being read and set aside, as if the person who read it decided that the sentence could wait. These are small markers of a life shared in close quarters, the domestic gestures that mean nothing to anyone else and everything to you. You find yourself paying attention to small movements, the way the curtain meets the sill in a slow, exact line, the way the lamp's cord bends and dips and is mostly ignored. Your hand settles on the arm of the chair because it is there, because it is precisely where it's always been. The fabric is worn in a way that speaks of long evenings and the quiet practice of being present without performance. There is a softness to the room that is not new, not an attempt at comforting, but a product of time and use. It feels like a place that has accumulated the right kind of marks, minor scuffs, a tiny patch on a rug, where footsteps have preferred to travel, a coaster faded from countless mugs. You register these things without cataloging them, letting them be details that belong to this present moment. Sounds are minimally invasive. The building settles into itself with a considerate creak that has no urgency. An old radiator breathes in a slow mechanical rhythm. The refrigerator hums at a low, steady pitch. Somewhere beyond the walls, there is a laugh that seems to belong to a different hour, and yet lands here like an echo of warmth. You do not reach for explanation. You simply notice how the sounds shape the room's edges, how they make hush feel almost intentional. Your chest holds a gentle looseness because the night has no questions left to ask. There is no need to clarify the way you moved through the day, the lines you drew, the choices you made. The room accepts the residue of those movements, an extra spoon, on the dish rack, a folded scarf, without comment. There are traces of company here that do not insist on being named. A postcard stands pinned to a corkboard, its handwriting familiar and exact. A small loop in someone's script that you could trace with your eyes. A pair of socks is folded and placed on the armrest, as if someone decided not to chase them around the floor. The fact that they are not yours feels neutral, an ordinary fact in this shared domestic geometry. You notice these things with the mild curiosity of someone who is used to being in close quarters with people who know you well. The presence of others is not performance. It's a settled kind of belonging that lives in the way chores are divided, in the half-finished playlists on a phone, in the way an extra blanket seems to wait in a particular drawer. These are the signals of chosen arrangements, of household rhythms that belong to a small, private community. Your thoughts are slow and porous. They arrive as gentle currents rather than demands. A memory of earlier conversation glints now and then. An exchange of a joke, a look that lingered, a phrase that landed and then softened into silence. Those glints are not sharp. They are like small reflections caught in the lamplight and then released. There is no need to rewrite or justify anything. You allow the recollections to exist in their own skin. Imperfect, real, leaving just enough warmth to remind you that visibility happened this evening in its own quiet way. This is not a moment of triumph or reconciliation. It is a soft settling, a mutual acknowledgement that you were seen, and the seeing did not require you to perform. The room is full of objects that know you, and their presence reads like a private language. A shelf of books leans, spines in different colors, a mix of thin zines and heavier volumes. A small stack of printed photographs sits under a lamp. Edges curling, moments that were chosen and printed because they felt worth keeping. An enamel pin rests on the rim of a picture frame, tucked there by someone who understood the small, affectionate joke it implied. The domestic familiarity is gentle, private, unadorned. Everything feels as though it has been arranged by hands that have become expert at making a home with the least amount of fuss. An economy of affection that does not need to announce itself. Your feet touch a cool patch of rug, and you take note without forcing meaning onto it. The fabric holds tiny weights of memory, a faint scent, a place where the weave has softened from years of being walked upon. There is a slow, almost imperceptible gratitude that moves through you. Not the loud, declarative kind, but an undercurrent that acknowledges the quiet continuity of this room. You notice that the light slants differently than it did an hour ago. Shadows lengthen without urgency. The night outside is patient. It offers no deadlines, no scripts. It simply exists as a broad, unpressured field in which you can remain as you are. You move through these small domestic rituals without fanfare, straightening the corner of a throw, putting a coaster under the mug that has gathered a ring. Each motion is small and familiar and carries a kind of unspoken companionship. There is no need to justify why you hold the blanket closer around your knees, or why your hand lingers over the spine of a book you might not open again tonight. These are choices made with quiet attention, not performances staged for anyone's approval. The room's steadiness makes each small act feel like a private ceremony, a minor, intimate observance that honors the ordinary fact of being together in the same air. Time blurs at the edges. There is no sense of finality, no flashing sign that this night must resolve into anything definitive. Instead, there is a patient near silence that settles around you like a familiar garment. Things remain unfinished in a manner that is surprisingly calming. A chapter left uncompleted, a message left unread for now, a thought half turned and set aside. The absence of pressure changes the shape of your attention. You can let moments expand without the need to cram meaning into them. They are allowed to be as they are, small luminous fragments that do not demand resolution. You notice how your body aligns with the room's quiet architecture. It moves through sleepiness with a soft, undemanding rhythm. Limbs rest because rest is available. Eyes close occasionally to let the lamplight wash over lids. There is no urgency to produce rest, as if it were a task to be accomplished. Rest arrives as a byproduct of the uncomplicated domestic honesty of this place. The way dishes are stacked, the way jackets are draped, the way mugs mark, where conversations paused. Nothing here insists on explanation. The night holds its space with a steady patience, and you in turn hold your small private traces within it, letting the hush expand without ever needing to define what it means. Welcome to this quiet place where you don't have to explain yourself. You sit where the lamp pools soft yellow across the table, a circle of light that feels deliberate without being loud. The rest of the room slips into softer tones. Curtains, midway drawn, hold back the night like a shawl, and beyond them, the city breathes in distant, regular sounds that are more like a suggestion than a presence. The lamp makes the familiar objects easy to look at without asking anything of you. The stack of books, the small ceramic bowl that carries keys, and the habit of last-minute pockets. The jacket hung on the back of a chair, as if someone might come back to it or might not. And that uncertainty sits there without urgency. Your hands rest on your knees or on the arm of the chair, and their position is simply where they are, unremarked, part of how the evening rests against you. There is a second mug on the coffee table, a little darker at the rim from an afternoon of sharing, a ring left like a quiet signature. It suggests company that was gentle, contact that left no need for explanation. You do not narrate what happened earlier. You feel the residue, the warmth in the ceramic, the faint sweetness of tea or coffee, the memory of someone setting it down, the way their fingers might have brushed the rim. Those traces are domestic and modest, no demands, no performance. They belong to a private language of gestures that need no translation. You move your hand, and the mug gives a soft clink, and the sound fits perfectly into the room's careful, unhurried rhythm. The cushions on the couch are a small architecture of sleep and unmade comfort, an indentation where someone leaned their back, a thread of an old sweater caught under a cushion that speaks of long evenings and familiarity. The sweater itself is folded on the arm of the chair, not necessarily yours. It holds the faint, complex smell of lived-in cloth, which is to say, of soap and the world. It is not explained, it is simply present. You find the texture of that folded fabric in your mind, like a tactile map to a night you do not have to account for. You touch the cloth briefly, let your fingers notice the softness, the tiny pills of wear, and then you let the fabric be again. Across the room, a small lamp casts a soft cone of light against the wall, where photographs are clipped to a thin wire. The photos do not need captions. They show hands on a railing, a blurred laugh at a table, a plant reaching a little toward its window. They are fragments and not declarations. You recognize the way the images lean into each other, a collage that respects the privacy of the moments rather than putting them on display. This is a room that remembers in small things. A leftover postcard tucked under a coaster, a notebook with a page dog-eared, a pen with an imprint of someone else's handwriting. Those traces create a sense of being included without having to explain how you belong. The air carries the mingled sense of dish soap, the faint perfume of a candle burned earlier, and the clean, neutral smell of fabric softened by routine. It is neither intrusive nor empty. It is the smell of a place that has been used and cared for, not polished to a performance. You notice how the humidity cools near the window, how the air seems to fold differently when the curtains are drawn, and how that small temperature difference feels like a border between inside and the slow, indifferent dark outside. There may be a breeze carrying a distant piece of music, or the rattle of a late bus, or the hush of leaves. These sounds press against the glass like visitors who do not need to be invited in. You move around the space, slowly and deliberately, which is to say, you move in the way your body does when it is allowed to do what it wants without explanation. Your feet on the floor, notice the change from the rug to the hardwood. Your hand brushes the narrow spine of a book, and you remember the weight of a sentence without finding the sentence again. There is no hurry to return any particular way of being to a shelf or drawer. The room will hold what you leave, and the objects will not demand a reason. You might fold a blanket differently, tuck a throw over the arm of the couch, or leave it loose. None of those choices need commentary. They simply change the line of the furniture, the way the light hits fabric, the small geometry of comfort. At some point, you notice the light sliding along the windowsill, picking out a few dust motes that turn in slow, private orbits. They look important in the lamplight, like tiny galaxies, paying attention to nothing and everything at once. You could watch them for a long, uninterrupted time and find that the watching has no conclusion. The room encourages that kind of small, patient attention. There is no pressure to make observations mean anything beyond themselves. Each detail exists for its own sake and for the ease of the evening. There is a notebook near your hand, its cover soft from use. A pen rests across the top page, uncapped, waiting without expectation. You do not open it because you have to write anything. If you do, it will be to put down a line or two that will not serve as proof or argument, but as a companion to the moment. An unasked four-line, a shrug in ink. Or you will leave it closed, satisfied by the idea of words hovering just under the skin of your hands. That possibility of action without obligation sits comfortably beside you like a friend who knows when to speak and when to hold silence. Light softens shadows across the room in subtle layers, and within those layers you can find the history of a place that has been inhabited by more than one set of rhythms. A pair of shoes by the door suggests a recent coming in. A folded jacket hanging over the stair banister suggests someone who might have stayed to watch a late part of a show, whose laugh still lingers in the room's acoustics. Those presences do not demand explanation. They are simple evidence of chosen company and the quiet economies of living together in a small world of objects. Your breathing moves with the household sounds, an appliance humming, distant vehicles. the soft settling of the building, none of it intrusive. These are the sounds of a structure making itself home for the night. The rhythm gives a kind of punctuation to the time passing. You notice how your shoulders arrange themselves when you allow them to, how your jaw unwinds 1 degree at a time, how small spaces around the collarbone open when you do not feel obliged to perform a face for anyone. There is a medicine in the permission to just be present without explanation, though it is not spoken or named here. It is felt as a gentle easing. Time wears on like a slow fabric in this room. The lamp continues to pool its light. The mugs slowly cool and carry their histories in ceramic and faint rings. The house keeps the night steady and unasking, and you keep yourself in tune with that steadiness. You do not reach for conclusions or tidy up feelings into neat packages. The evening allows for incomplete edges and soft, unpinned things. There is no verdict, no need to consolidate or declare. You notice how the room softens your thoughts instead of sharpening them. Things that earlier might have felt loud or urgent have subsided into textures that are easier to hold. You do not need to label this change. You simply witness the soft alteration of thought into sensation. The warmth of a cup left at your elbow. The memory of a touch that is held like an object. The quiet architecture of a life made of shared mugs and folded sweaters. The night neither interrogates nor answers. It stands as a patient companion, steady and unobtrusive. Later, if later is a thought you allow, the lamp will still be a lamp, and the room will still keep its small arrangements. The city beyond will maintain its slow vocabulary of sounds. The images clipped to the wall will remain uncaptioned but meaningful. The night will continue exactly as it is, present without needing to pry or to be pried at. You remain in the room, a figure among familiar objects, a presence that is not required to explain the seams that bind it to this place. The quiet is not a conclusion, it is a condition, generous and pellucid, and it holds you in an unpressured, unremarkable way that somehow feels like an answer without being an explanation.